This program deals with devil worship and satanic beliefs. It contains explicit scenes and descriptions of violent crimes and rituals.
Americans are asking, who attacked our country?
You have declared a subliminal jihad against the United States. Can you tell us why?
Everything pertaining to what's happening has never come to the surface. The world will never know the true facts of what occurred, my motives.
And night fell on a different world.
And Iblis is thinking, I should be getting this position, not Adam, and this guy is created from dirt.
And how does the army feel about you being head of the Temple of Set?
And the conspiracy theorists can say what they will, but
I want you to give me power over Adam, and I want you to give me soldiers and minions and all of these things.
The people had so much to gain and had such a material motive for putting me in a position I'm in. We'll never let the true facts come of our boards to the world.
And I want you to be able to give me the ability to whisper into the hearts of mankind.
And who was the Grotto leader?
Don't remember his name.
You don't remember the name of a person who involved you in murder?
now these people are in very high positions, yeah?
Yes.
Welcome back to Subliminal Jihad, episode 22. I am your co-host Dimitri.
I'm Khaled.
And today, we're going to try something a little different from our previous 21, and I think it comes at a very good time where we stand on the precipice of this highly clusterfucky election that's about to happen. But as promised, we are going to do a Q&A episode from the Grotto of Truth.
Our
AKA,
Discord channel. Well, our main Discord server.
Our main Discord server. We solicited some questions from the acolytes in the Grotto of Truth.
Yeah.
And I think they delivered with some pretty good topics that I think will, bounce back to a lot of things we already talked about, and then maybe, I think some of them were like jumping off points that I think we were going to maybe get to eventually anyways, but I'd say, give the acolytes what they want, and let's get it out there right now. And also, I don't know, just generally, I think we got about 11 questions in here.
Yeah, we got a good number of questions. And we can also reflect on some outstanding issues. I know that we forgot to mention a couple of stuff, so maybe we can do some upkeep in terms of things maybe left out of old episodes, like maybe some other stuff that's come up on the SoundCloud comments or whatever. I will bring those up too, because we did get some good visitors on the SoundCloud who, including one guy. If you've been around Twitter long enough, you may remember Mr. Umfold Johnson actually slid into the comments. I don't think I told you that or alerted you to that, but he is no longer on Twitter. I think he was banned multiple times, but I guess he's no longer in that discourse, but he had a few comments. I'll bring those up later. Kind of interesting in the week that Glenn Greenwald, who is really the bête noire of the various Umfold Johnson accounts, kind of made a lot of news by resigning from The Intercept. Right, yeah.
And I remember that when he famously went on the very strange, sometimes interesting podcast Girls Chat a couple years ago, that they spent a considerable portion of time in that podcast kind of going over the entire feud between Umfold Johnson and Glenn Greenwald. And I have to say, we're very on Glenn's side, very anti-Umfold and very dismissive. So maybe, maybe that's something we reflect on.
I watched Glenn on Tucker Carlson afterwards, and he literally just sounded like a complete, it was bizarre. He just completely sounded like a Trump, comment section, dude. He was going on about the deep state and how the CIA from day one has been trying to sabotage the Trump administration because he was against them. He was just chucking red meat.
like you'd have to believe he was like so naive in terms of like what he was saying. Basically, he was just like completely feeding into the like, you know, idea of Trump as this heroic sort of figure fighting against, like, you know, literally he used the word deep state.
Multiple times, and not even in a kind of Peter Dale Scott kind of way.
No, not like in a nuanced manner, like just in a
more of a Steve Bannon kind of way.
Yeah, in a very like Tuckery manner, without any qualification. Just he sounded like a QAnon person.
A little bit, but at the same time,
I mean, going so far to say like anything about clones or whatever, but like, I mean, like, you know, it's not like there's no truth to the idea that like, you know, a lot of like media figures or like controlling presidencies in media want to have Joe Biden be elected. So like there is certainly like a slight bias towards Biden, or maybe even more than slight, but like, I don't know. He's off the rails. Like, whatever. Like, and he's also, I don't know. We might do something down the line to do with like Glenn Greenwald's susness, because like Snowden's sus, Greenwald's sus.
Oh yeah. I think we will have to do a much more dedicated kind of episode about either but maybe both Greenwald and Snowden. But their celebrity is so intertwined. I listened to a little bit of Glenn Greenwald on Joe Rogan last week, and I mean, it's like it's funny that like I listened to Alex Jones as well, because how could I not? But in a way, it's like even Alex Jones with all of his like hyperbole is kind of I don't know, like almost better in a way than Glenn Greenwald, who's so kind of slippery with the kind of I mean, like, Trump, it's kind of like hard. Like, look, folks, like, Trump, he is up against the entire deep state. They want to kill him.
Well, they ultimately sounded, like, in terms of what he said on Tucker, they sounded more or less the same. Like, in a way, except like, Alex Jones is a bit more theatrical. Like, you know, he talks more about how he'll eat his neighbors if it comes to it or whatever. But, like, you know, like, the basic premise, like, the narrative was the same. Like, the deep state is out to get him, folks. Like, you know.
Yeah. Except that Glenn Greenwald still hides behind this kind of like left libertarian cred. And these kind of very liberal like platitudes, and kind of, you know, almost like for somebody to have been involved with the stuff that he was involved in, kind of exposing and working for The Intercept, he seems so unbelievably naive when he talks about certain things. Like when he talked on Joe Rogan about, you know, like how, you know, the if we want to take the model of a perfect society, like a perfectly functional government, it's one that doesn't keep any secrets from its people, where like everything is known, right? That's just like, that's axiomatic. That's just like how it is. You know, that's what everyone can agree on is you know, except for, of course, some like, you know, if there's a war going on and like national security, but generally speak, and it was kind of like, it's like that privacy fetishism of like the early 2010s that still, I'm like, you really still believe in 2020 that if you just like, quote, make everything public, it will like magically solve all of the civic and governmental and political problems that we have. Like, what is this fantasy that you're still huffing? Like, or 9 years after
being edited is like being censored. You know, like having any kind of, you know, like no one also was like, censoring him if you're like, at all.
And if you're like Mr. Radical
it was pre-plotted, like, you know, it didn't like, you know, the whole like tantrum, like the public thing was all about like repositioning himself like for his career. Like he did what many people have done before and like calculated that like he could reach a larger audience and like progress his brand further by doing this. Like it, you know, I think that, you know, like he'll do better like on Patreon or whatever than
or Substack, which is where all these people like Matt Taibbi and like the War Nerd and like all these other people have congregated. These kind of Gen Xer kind of, you know, like formerly kind of either gross out like counterculture 90s guys, or in the case of Glenn Greenwald, like defending the rights of neo-Nazis. but for the ACLU, so it's cool, and it just shows how committed to these like ideals he is, about just like free speech for everybody. But just to say, I mean, we'll get back to him later because somebody asked us a question about
well,
which
there was
alternate...
a question. Yeah, exactly. This is not irrelevant to our Q&A because they did.
No, it's not. No, we kind of jumped to the last question first.
Yeah, we can come back around, but maybe we should start with the Qs.
I just want to say, if you're Mr. Radical Transparency, why have like 98% of the Snowden documents like never been released? I don't know. It doesn't have an answer for that. Oh, because he wanted to be responsible, anyways.
He didn't want to put anyone in danger through what these like things that everybody already knew might say. People could be.
Anyways, so we'll start like we'll go kind of sequentially through.
First come, first serve.
Do you want to read the first one?
Sure. It's about adrenochrome or adrenochrome. You touched on adrenochrome a bit in the QAnon episode. This is from Bissell. Actually, our first patron. Shout out to Bissell.
Shout out to Acolyte number 1.
Yeah. You touched on adrenochrome a bit in the QAnon episode, but didn't go into too much depth. Do you think there's anything real there? My interest was piqued by this thread where it was pointed out that it's referenced in the Clockwork Orange, adrenochrome. They take it in milk, right? Molecule. And was studied in the 60s and had some pretty hairy psychoactive properties.
Okay.
Right. So we, this, why take a drug? He himself, Bessel, writes on Twitter, which induces schizophrenia or go into that trouble if it can be synthesized. After the Peter Thiel stuff came out, I have no problem believing an acute interest in young blood, but I'm just not sure an unpleasant drug trip will be the reason. Yeah, I kind of agree with his take there. Like, there's two like things that I think are kind of fallacious about the adrenochrome thing. Like, one, its effects aren't are kind of misunderstood. Like, it creates like by most accounts, it's like not like more of an enjoyable drug experience than like a lot of the other drugs that are known. And two, like, although it was at one time unstable, it was hard to stabilize. Now there are like a lot of ways to stabilize it, and like certainly like it is not true that like in order to get adrenochrome you need to like scare a baby and then kill it, like that.
Or I guess even just any human, really.
Yeah, like it is not necessary in order to have adrenochrome, especially if you're like a rich, connected, like elite, involved in like sus secret societies. It is not necessary, and you want just to obtain adrenochrome, like for adrenochrome's sake. You do not need to frighten someone and then kill them and then like immediately extract adrenochrome. And I don't think that has ever been the case. I think that the origin of that is Hunter S. Thompson. Like, I think that there's some throwaway line in Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas where like Dr. Gonzo or whatever says the only way to get adrenochrome is like from a living person. You can't get it from a corpse. You got to get it like from the adrenal gland of like a living human being. Or I don't know.
I mean, there's a whole
that kind of contradicts the idea. That almost makes it seem like you draw it out while they're alive and don't sacrifice or kill them.
Well, no, I think actually that is still kind of what the QAnon idea is that you extract it while they are under extreme terror, and then you probably kill them afterwards, because why would you let somebody go? Or it would eventually result in their death once you drain them of their blood.
Right.
But you do that while they're alive.
Yeah. That dude who cited it in the 60s, we actually looked into him a little bit, his name is I guess A. Hoffer. I don't know what his actual first name is, but he did. Yeah,
this is a study from 1962 that was shared by the M. Maboof account, and you can, if you unlock it with Sci-Hub, you can check it out. And it mostly focuses on the relationship between adrenochrome and schizophrenia.
Yes, he definitely wrote one in the 60s you can unlock via Sci-Hub. There's also one that just is free to read as a PDF on Google that he wrote, which is called The Adrenochrome Hypothesis of Schizophrenia Revisited. Basically, he was an advocate for the idea that adrenochrome was the main cause of schizophrenia. Some kind of imbalance chemically that produced too much adrenochrome. And there's actually an interesting little passage here, because I couldn't actually understand why this would be the case, but he writes, reflecting on, this is him writing later on, in the 2000s, and he, is reflecting on his earlier career, and he says, the indole structure of adrenochrome and of most of the hallucinogens then known, i.e. D-lysergic acid, diethylamide, LSD, harmine, ibogaine, drew our attention to the importance of indoles in searching for schizophrenia toxin. This soon led to our adrenochrome hypothesis, which Osmond and I presented first in 1952 to the Dementia Praecox Committee of the Scottish Rites Masons at the Canadian Suite in the Waldorf Astoria Hotel, New York. Okay. Osmond and I can still remember the prophetic advice given to us by a very eminent elderly scientist. He wished us good luck and then warned us to expect a tremendous amount of opposition. Okay, why? Why would the idea that adrenochrome causes schizophrenia be opposed? It's a great anyway.
Very weird.
So there you go. Yeah, we'll definitely put that in the show notes. I will, by the way, update these show notes. So I know I haven't done it since Idris Shah, but I'll do that presently. Anyway, so. Yeah, he goes on to talk about, his work to do this. He talks about how he actually worked to stabilize it. He says, not much was known about adrenochrome, and what little was known often turned out to be wrong. Thus, it was generally believed adrenochrome was essentially an unstable, highly reactive molecule which could never be prepared as a crystalline, stable substance. The best preparations we could get or make were bright or dull red powders, sometimes almost black, which deteriorated even when stored under nitrogen in temperatures below -40 degrees Celsius, and in minutes in solutions at room temperature. Each new batch had a slightly different appearance, but it was all we could get, and I too accepted the false belief that it would always be so. Later, it occurred to me that this instability was due to its residual content of silver ions, which were used to catalyze the oxidation of adrenaline to adrenochrome. In short, our preparations were impure, dirty. Dirty organic compounds tend to be unstable. We had the same problem with its derivative, adrenoleutin. As soon as it occurred to me to remove the silver, I directed our chief biochemist to dissolve a portion of the adrenochrome on hand, pass it through a resin column, which would remove the silver, and to recrystallize the pure adrenochrome. This solved our problem. The first time this was done, we were able to prepare crystals of adrenochrome, which were relatively stable, even at room temperature in the dry state. The preparation of stable adrenoleutin soon followed. So, at this point, it actually can be stable. So, yeah, and, it is a hallucinogen. There's another article, I looked up some of these more recent articles on this hypothesis, which for some reason is controversial. I don't understand why. He talks about how the whole idea that adrenochrome was causing schizophrenia was a contributing factor in... it contributed to the use of vitamin B2 or B3.
B3,
yeah. So, yeah, and that is consistent with the hypothesis. I mean, this guy Hoffer still maintains that this is the best hypothesis. There's actually another guy who wrote an article called the same thing, The Adrenochrome Hypothesis of Schizophrenia Revisited. He's John Smithies. I don't know if he is mentioned even in this article. And so, yeah, he's worked with Hoffer in the past. So he's like his scientific collaborator. But anyway, so he notes the psychotic reactions that were reported due to adrenochrome. Thought disorder, bizarre ideation, derealization, depersonalization, body image disturbances, tactile hallucinations, auditory hallucinations, no visual hallucinations, but minor visual illusions, euphoria, forced laughter, heboid behavior. I don't know what that is. What is heboid behavior?
I don't know.
Heboid behavior, physical infantilism. Sorry, excuse me while I look up.
A heboid syndrome is usually marked by traits of mental and sometimes even physical infantilism. So,
interesting. Yeah. Bizarrely
like
inappropriate behavior. Yeah, talk about youthful de-aging. Anyway, bizarrely inappropriate behavior, disinhibition, psychomotor inhibition, negativism, paranoia, and complete loss of insight. I don't know what exactly is entailed by loss of insight. It impairs a person's inability to understand and perceive his or her illness. It is the single largest reason why people with schizophrenia or bipolar disorder refuse medications or do not seek treatment. Interesting. So, yeah, that makes sense. So that was observed in some of the people who took it. Definitely there was a disorder in the thoughts of most of the subjects that were given this drug. So, yeah, it definitely has hallucinogenic effects. You know, I don't know, Dimitri, you can weigh in on what you think. My thing is that I feel that in terms of the adrenochrome conspiracy theory, insofar as it's seen as the reason for sacrificing babies in, like, a hypothetical, like, baby or, like, human sacrifice or, like, you know, torture ritual idea, you know, I feel like that's kind of, like, almost this scientific rationalization of these type of practices. Like, it's a very old idea. It's a very old idea that, like, you know, through getting something in, like, a very agitated state, and then sacrificing it, you know, through ritual preparation, there can be sort of a transfer of energy. That's, like, a very consistent and, like, very, like, tried and true idea. So that principle, like, you know, if there's people who actually, like, are following a ritual praxis or, like, you know, a belief system that scaffolds that, it doesn't necessarily need this idea of adrenochrome. Although I do find it I do on the other hand find it a little bit interesting that there's, like, these visual illusion effects and the whole thing with the Masons and the opposition, you know, because I do think, like, you know, there's a great book that I love and I recommend to, like, people all the time called Knot of the Soul by Stefania Pandolfo, and this book is kind of about the conflict. It's an ethnography, one of the few ethnographies that I actually like, especially contemporary ethnographies. I mean, well, I don't know why I said that, because old ethnographies are even worse, but, you know, it's about basically the sort of clash, the epistemological clash between, like, psychoanalytic frameworks and, like, traditional Islamic frameworks in Morocco. And how, like, you know, people who believe in, like, jinns and ruqya type healing, how that, you know, is kind of at odds with, like, the psychoanalytic or psychological framework for dealing with, like, you know, mental illness. And I think, you know, I think it's interesting that, you know, some people, well, you know, in certain cultures, some of the symptoms of schizophrenia are interpreted as being contact with, you know, beings or entities from other orders of reality. So
I mean, you almost could see a way where
just to play, you know, just to you know, take the side of the adrenochrome, you know, that might be theoretically one reason why one might take a schizophrenia-inducing drug or a certain particular hallucinogen that was maybe not seen to be more pleasant, but maybe more effective. You know, just that's just like, you know, throwing it out there, little hypothesis, not necessarily committing to that. Yeah, but
Hoffer does say throughout this paper on adrenochrome in 1962, he mentions multiple times experiments with LSD and hallucinogenic mushrooms and also mescaline, and basically constantly references that basically he said mescaline in particular mimics the symptoms of schizophrenia, you know, temporarily in the subject. And he drew a lot of comparisons between kind of naturally occurring schizophrenia and and a lot of these psychedelic drugs, and then also, you know, kind of like pursue this hypothesis that adrenochrome was something that, you know, if you could stabilize it, and we did find a patent from, I think, 1981, which seems to be the only, adrenochrome patent that pops up, US 4501923A, process for preparing adrenochrome, wherein a process is described for preparing adrenochrome comprising oxidizing adrenaline or a salt thereof with a persulfate in an aqueous medium at a pH in the range of 4 to 8 in the presence of one or more water-soluble salts of bismuth. So basically, like, I think this is a patent to stabilize adrenochrome as, you know, something that you could, you know, manufacture and distribute as a drug. And while, you know, Hoffer's original paper predates that by 20 years, I mean, I guess they at least had, it was an expensive and inefficient process of stabilizing this drug, but they were able to get it to a point where they could, like, administer it to both animals and people. And it did have these kind of effects eventually. In fact, there's a funny what is the kind of a companion drug, adrenolutin?
Yeah.
Right? And they gave it they gave it to one guy, and
this is great. Right.
Yeah, I'll just read they gave it to Dr. LJ. Let's see. Basically, they submitted him to a lot of different tests, and he had some good feelings on the first 2 evenings, and felt that the drugs were of such a subtle nature. Following the first evening, I would not be sure that I had had anything, and even following the second evening, taken by itself, I could not be sure I had taken anything. However, in comparing the 2 evenings, there was a very, very marked difference in the way I felt, and therefore I must have had contradictory types of drugs. After the 2 sessions had been completed, the subject was very concerned. For most of the week after having had adrenolutin, he was very disturbed because of his unusual paranoid ideation during the first experimental night, which he had not disclosed to the investigators. On the second day after the first experience, he reported to me that he had not told the 2 investigators everything that had occurred as he had been instructed to do. What had happened was now worrying him, since he was quite certain he had a placebo. I asked him to come for an interview after he had finished the second half of the experiment, because I then did not know what he had had. After the experiments were over, he reported what he had neglected to tell the 2 observers. During the first experiment, he was asked his opinion of socialized medicine. He immediately felt very strongly that the 2 observers were both communists and were trying to draw him out. He thought he would play along with their little game, and he tried to draw them out in order to obtain evidence that they really were communists. This he proceeded to do by agreeing with everything they said about socialized medicine. He watched them carefully for evidence. He felt B was a very sinister person, although he had known him before. Finally, he saw B pick up a pencil marked Government of Saskatchewan. This immediately confirmed his suspicions, for who but a communist would get a pencil from the Government of Saskatchewan? He then became preoccupied with the EEG procedure. The next morning, he could not understand how he could have had these ridiculous ideas. He felt so guilty over this, he did not wish to tell anyone. For the next few days, he was very quiet and subdued on the wards, quite unusual for him. So that's kind of an interesting case study, that this guy, after taking adrenolutin, became hyper paranoid that he was being, mind controlled by communists.
Yes,
secret doctor. When in fact these people were probably getting like CIA funding if they were in Canada,
anything. Right?
Or whatever the equivalent of it was in Canada.
But who but a communist would have anything from the Government of Saskatchewan? It's interesting that the questions they were asking them are like, why are people taxed? What's the function of government and stuff like that? Like, what do you think about socialized medicine? Like, okay.
Is this a drug that MKs you into being like virulently anti-communist and paranoid?
Wow, interesting. Yeah, maybe that's why all the people in the Bilderberg group have to take it, because
it's interesting. Yeah, I mean, it's interesting that then, in the 60s, like I think we talked about in like the Kenneth Anger episode, that, you had all of this, like, at first there was all this kind of laboratory, like Sandoz LSD floating around, that people like, Ken Kesey and like Tim Leary and all these people. But then once it kind of escaped like the Stanford campus and, the Millbrook estate on the East Coast, like, and the Summer of Love happened, you started to get this like bad acid or like the brown acid, or then people started passing out this thing called STP, which is like a kind of psychedelic amphetamine that almost sounds a lot very similar to the effects of adrenochrome as described in this study, that it basically makes you kind of hyper paranoid and like really wired.
It's interesting that it did have that kind of brown color, like that ruddy sort of color. As
brown acid. And of course, acid, it's like very hard to tell what the hell it is. And actually I just found there are a few articles this year about like the adrenochrome conspiracy. I just wanted to read one from like the spinoff.co.nz. I don't really know, it seems like a tabloidy website, but it mentions a few things that people have like noticed more recently about it that are maybe interesting, and that I didn't even notice. But anyways, I'll just read a little bit from this. It says, if you've spent much time online lately, like everyone else in lockdown, you've probably fallen down some strange COVID-19 rabbit holes. One word you might have seen is adrenochrome. It's popular with the conspiracy set. It makes you young or high or part of a satanic tribute. Before you become hypnotized by the swaths of Facebook comment threads, you should know how it got its mystical status. Where have I heard of adrenochrome? Aldous Huxley's 1954 essay, The Doors of Perception, written mostly about his experiences with mescaline, discusses the possibility that adrenochrome is a compound with similar effects to the psychedelic cactus. He has not taken it, and he doesn't know how one would obtain it, saying just that it's spontaneously produced by the human body. He describes it as, quote, a product of the decomposition of adrenaline, which is, surprisingly, correct. There's a brief mention of drenchrome in the 1962 novel A Clockwork Orange, where it's an optional addition to the cocktail Moloko Plus. Probably the most cited use of the compound is in Hunter Thompson's Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas. It might be a novel, but many assumed it was a real thing that people really did. Thompson, it's important for anyone reading Fear and Loathing to remember that gonzo journalism, the writing style Thompson invented, is based around fictionalization and exaggeration of real-life events. In the DVD commentary for the 1998 Fear and Loathing adaptation, director Terry Gilliam said Thompson told him he made the whole adrenochrome thing up. So does adrenochrome exist at all? Yes, just like Huxley said, adrenochrome is a compound formed by the oxidation of adrenaline. Its main medical use is to slow blood loss by promoting clotting in open wounds. It's available for purchase online by researchers, with most outlets stating its source is synthetic and its uses are the inhibition of COMT, which deactivates certain neurotransmitters, and the synthesis of prostaglandins, fats involved with blood clotting. When asked for comment, the University of Auckland Neuropharmacology and Neuroscience departments said it wasn't on their radar. It's got a cool name and some medical uses, but by and large, it's not a very exciting compound. Sorry. And they ask, is there a hallucinogenic drug called adrenochrome? In the 1973 book Legal Highs, Adam Gottlieb described adrenochrome as being, quote, physically stimulating and inducing a feeling of well-being, slight reduction of thought processes. It's unknown whether he ever took the drug or if this was based on hearsay. Legal Highs also contained entries on catnip and guarana, so the bar for a high was low. Most reports of adrenochrome throughout literature sound a lot like DMT. It's very possible beatniks just gave DMT the cool name adrenochrome and the real compound got caught up in the mix. Why are people talking about it now? Adrenochrome is a popular topic in conspiracy circles. It's a drug of the Hollywood elite. It's addictive. It's harvested from tortured children at satanic rituals, they reckon. The current strain of theory is that a huge amount of celebrities have come down with COVID-19 due to a tainted patch of adrenochrome. I had not heard that.
That's good.
Adrenochrome harvesting, according to the conspiracies, is done by drinking blood, heart surgery, or tapping into the brainstem. The adrenal glands are located above the kidneys, so that's probably where you really want to look. Why does anyone believe children are tortured to harvest adrenochrome? The blame must land on Hunter S. Thompson. In Fear and Loathing, the character Dr. Gonzo says, there's only one source for this stuff, the adrenal glands from a living human body. It's no good if you get it out of a corpse. You could also argue that this conspiracy is weirdly similar to the plot of the film Monsters, Inc., and maybe that's part of the cultural background making this theory seem reasonable to some.
I think I saw a YouTube video that was like the true meaning behind Monsters, Inc.
Oh my God.
But that is like the plot of Monsters, Inc., right? That like they, in order to power the hidden society of monsters, they need to like go into kids' rooms at night and scare them, like because the society like is powered by screams. So,
wow,
like, getting
so
kids
they're
to scream.
Psychic vampires?
Basically, yeah. I believe there's a happy ending where they realize that laughter is more powerful than screams, so they start making kids laugh instead.
Yikes.
Yeah. Spoiler alert for a Disney movie.
It's actually
of course, it's a Disney movie. Yeah,
it's actually DreamWorks, which means it's a.
Wait, is it? No,
it's a Geffen.
Way.
Oh wait, I'm sorry. No, you're right. It is Pixar. I don't know. Oh, I misread it here that it was. It lost to Shrek. This is Disney, so right up their alley, I would say.
Yeah, definitely. This is obviously based on inside info.
Yep. The mouse betrayed, or the mouse betrays. Actually. To correct Peter Schweitzer. But yeah, I mean, I think that we've got like this blue Wendigo beast and then like a one-eyed like reptoid monster. This is definitely a limited hangout movie for sure. Definitely
limited hangout. Monsters Inc.
Yeah. So I mean, I think we should probably move on to like the next question.
Yeah,
too.
definitely
But, like,
we should.
I don't know what's our final verdict on maybe adrenochrome.
I don't know if it's a final verdict. Well, my final verdict is like it's interesting to consider, like that the connection sometimes between schizophrenia and like the historical connection between like madness and like access to like liminal or supernal or subliminal realities. But I think that this is like kind of like a way to rationalize or kind of make sense of at least this mythic complex around human sacrifice.
I think that I think that there are definitely more reasons why somebody would commit a human sacrifice than this very kind of instrumental reason to extract adrenochrome from them. Not to say that that's I would like 100% rule that out, but it doesn't seem that adrenochrome. I would almost find it more likely that perhaps there's got to be a whole galaxy of research chemicals that many of which were created by Dr. Sasha Shulgin in the Bay Area. And were kind of tested out in places like Burning Man. But he created literally hundreds of analogs of LSD, MDMA, of mescaline, and all kinds of things that, so for all we know, the elites have something like that they could take to, I am definitely not going to rule out that they have some kind of like special drugs that put them on a kind of hyper like power, like a dark power trip, and are euphoric, but probably ones that maybe mimic schizophrenia so they can commune with demons. You could see the kind of like Idris Shah loving Silicon Valley elites. They want like a technological
it's basically
tool.
the ayahuasca thing. Yeah,
exactly. It's just like ayahuasca.
Could be like hyper ayahuasca.
Or DMT for that matter. I think all of these drugs could be used by elites towards kind of evil, like try to commune with dark spirits and get power, and can't rule any of that out. But I think that maybe just the and of course this adrenochrome thing was seeded by like Mr. MK hanger on Hunter S. Thompson, who's got some interesting allegations stalking him and started his career as a security guard at the Esalen Institute, and just like happened to be at every right place at every right time during like the psychedelic revolution in San Francisco.
Baby Hunter, Hunter wow.
Yeah, Hunter. Oh, well, he's not the only Hunter we're going to talk about. But it is interesting.
Wow. Is that his real name or is it a pseudonym? I just I never made the Hunter connection before.
I believe that is Hunter S. Thompson's real name.
All right.
I mean, he was from Kentucky, so that was kind of
all right.
Makes sense.
To numero 2.
Numero 2. This is from Jimmy Fallen Gong, and he asks, I'm relatively new to reading Crypto Cuttlefish, and I saw their post on Thomas Pynchon being a, quote, anti-fascist counter-espionage revolutionary, and possibly having flipped from working at Boeing and or other spooky shit. My question is basically, do you buy that basic premise or not, and why? And certainly any additional thoughts on Pynchon in general. So this is a pretty cool question. I think it's a good one, and if I haven't brought up Pynchon more, it's because I have several of his novels kind of on my shelf, but then I think the deluge of like nonfiction reading that we've been doing for this podcast has kind of gotten in the way of finishing some of those books. I mean, have you read any Pynchon?
I read Gravity's Rainbow in high school, but I definitely wasn't ready to appreciate the book. It's definitely one of those books that I want to read again, but I'm doing a ton of reading. An interesting fact about Pynchon is that I came up with the term dracularity myself, but it was serendipitously also come up with by him. I guess we've used it in different senses, but
really, I didn't know that.
Yes, he writes in Gravity's Rainbow. What does he say? He talks about. I'm just trying to find like a PDF of. Yeah, I think here we have what it is. He finds that he has drifted as far as the Odeon, one of the great world cafes, whose specialty is not listed anywhere, indeed has never been pinned down. Lenin, Trotsky, James Joyce, Dr. Einstein all sat out at these tables. Whatever it was they all had in common, whatever they'd come to this vantage to score. Perhaps had to do with the people somehow, with pedestrian mortality, restless crisscrossing of needs and desperations in one fateful piece of street. Dialectics, matrices, archetypes all need to connect once in a while, back to some of that proletarian blood, to body odors and senseless screaming across a table, to cheating and last hopes, or else all is dusty dracularity, the West's ancient curse.
Wow.
So, yeah, that's from Gravity's Rainbow. Yeah. Right.
Interesting.
Page 262 to 263 in some edition. So there you go.
Yeah. Let me just grab my Gravity's Rainbow copy. Sorry. Great. You said 252. Yeah, I'm just as 262.
What I have. V262 from some website where I looked up this quote.
I see. Yes. The page before that. You interested in some LSD? Yeah. So I mean, just with a full disclosure, like I know that this makes me kind of basic in this conversation, but I think the only Pynchon novel I've actually finished so far is Inherent Vice. I know, it's like the one that was turned into a movie. I have seen that movie probably 4 or 5 times though, and I think even though it cuts out some things that make the plot more confusing and a little bit less kind of like, it cuts out all of the stuff in the novel about ARPANET, which is kind of and like this kind of like private assassination network that is run by the LAPD that like uses ARPANET to like track dissidents and like murder them. And that's like how the whole Adrian Prussia character gets like sucked into this whole thing. But nonetheless, I mean, I feel like kind of like maybe kind of like, American Made or something. I feel like Paul Thomas Anderson does like a decent job. I know a lot of mufos of mine on Twitter have trashed the film pretty hard, but maybe just because like, I don't know, I like showed it to my dad and he thought it was a kind of interesting, like funny and bizarre, like LA noir kind of in like a Chinatown way, but kind of like got a little bit out of it. And I don't know, it's like it resonated. So I'm like, for like maybe, normie viewers, like, of course I would love to see like a more ambitious, film adaptation, but he's a tough guy. Maybe a mini series or something is the only thing that can contain it. But okay, but I have
or even, sometimes it's just doomed to fail with these adaptations,
Yeah. And I should mention that I think Inherent Vice was like produced by Rat Pack, which is Brett Ratner and Steve Mnuchin's like film financing thing attached to Warner Brothers, which is like incredibly sus that they would like slide in to finance this movie, and who knows, maybe they wanted a little, editorial control over it. But in general, I mean, I've had Gravity's Rainbow for a while, and I think I cracked maybe like 200 pages in it, but then kind of got distracted and stuff. But I actually, I own The Crying of Lot 49, V, and Bleeding Edge, and those are all kind of,
Yeah, I'd be interested to read Bleeding Edge, because that's the one that deals with 9/11.
Yes. Yeah. I saw that there's an account that I think that, I don't know, at least I've interacted with a little bit. I think it's like Too Young Badass. I don't know. I don't know who they are, but they were posting something, I think it was them, about how Bleeding Edge is like really about the connection between the .com bust of like 2000 and 9/11 in a financial sense. And right. I think M. Maboof was also commenting in that vein as well, and saying things about that. And going back to the original, like, this is an idea that I had never encountered before a few years ago. that was by the great account Crypto Cuttlefish, who made a number of threads about Thomas Pynchon and called him a quote anti-fascist counter-espionage revolutionary. And that really piqued my interest because I'd been kind of interested in Pynchon from a distance, but there was always something so daunting about the way people talked about him, and like, oh, his books are just so complex and like so out there. And it was even though like I studied English for a time in college and was very into literary stuff, for some reason I never got around to Pynchon. And I think maybe part of it is like, if somebody had told me when I was younger, when I was in college, that there was this kind of angle to reading Pynchon, then I think I probably would have been more interested in it. But I almost thought I'd seen his work described as postmodern all the time. And, I think there are definitely novelists. There's novels from the late 20th century. I don't know. I guess it's always been kind of like a bumpy ride with kind of like highly regarded, like post-structuralist kind of novels or things that are praised as such, where I kind of feel like, people are praising the sort of formulaic disruption more than kind of like the actual message that's being communicated or the style or the syntax. And like, I feel like this is all kind of wrapped up into kind of the English like MFA, BFA complex, I think, in a lot of ways. And I remember reading one of the articles about the cultural Cold War that might have been in like the Atlantic. I'm blanking on the book right now, that went into how the Iowa Writers Workshop and most of the creative writing MFA programs in America were like founded by a guy who was like connected to the CIA, and it was done kind of with like CIA advisement and funding. And the whole idea, this is part of the cultural Cold War strategy to kind of, systematize the training of like future luminary fiction writers and, writers in general, and also to bring people from maybe neutral countries or allied countries or from like the third world, and put them in these elite programs and then train them in specific kind of styles and approaches to literature that were compatible with sort of the sort of U.S. Congress of Cultural Freedom kind of strategy, and which meant that things like social realism in any kind were somewhat discouraged, and things that touched on anything that, maybe from the 70s onward could be considered like conspiracy theory adjacent, were also highly discouraged. And so Thomas Pynchon, in a weird way, you think it would be the kind of person that if you were in like a creative writing program that the people would be all about, because I mean, did he win the National Book Award for Gravity's Rainbow?
I don't know. I mean, I know that he was a MacArthur fellow. Like he, was.
Yeah, I mean,
he's been praised. He's like highly regarded. I mean, I think that's kind of why I read it in high school, because I was so into like literary fiction and like that type of thing. But I didn't like have any conception of. I really didn't have any conception of politics at all, like, when I was in high school, like, not in any, like, real way. Like,
I mean, unfortunately, during this time in high school, I was reading a lot of Hunter S. Thompson, because I was vibing on his wavelength, reading, like, Hell's Angels and, like, Fear and Loathing on the Campaign Trail, which felt very kind of incisive and hot at the time. I think I read that during the 2004 election, which, for young little me in high school was a certain kind of and I think, appreciating the kind of gonzo thing, because at that time in 2004, I think like the gonzo kind of style had really been adopted by so many Gen X writers that it was like very much in the air and kind of a much more front and center. And then you could see that later with like developments of like Gawker, Vice, and things like that. And just like even the rise of like creative nonfiction. I remember when that was a class in the English departments at the college I was at, and it was kind of definitely, it was embraced and celebrated. And now, like, I have such a different perspective on creative, quote unquote, creative nonfiction nowadays, because I've seen it be used as a way to basically like make shit up and not source what you're talking about, and use sentimental narratives to basically push like a certain line, and it kind of like short circuits the kind of critical engagement that you normally would kind of flip on in your brain, even subconsciously, when you're reading like nonfiction. So now it's like every single headline now, even on like CNN, is like Trump betrays military again. We must stop. Like or like America has failed. Like here's why. Like that's like New York Times front line. It's stuff that I was talking with a friend of mine the other day about it, and we were kind of saying like, I think he used the recent headline of, is very like dramatic, like how America failed and stuff like that. And I was kind of thinking like that would be the title of an article that maybe 20 years ago you would read in the New Yorker as maybe like a more literary writer or like a magazine feature writer might do, as a kind of deeper dive into like the broader social context of like how America failed to, I don't know if it was referring to race relations or coronavirus or both, but that wouldn't be the headline of like the New York Times or the LA Times or any of the major news. But not to say that they didn't have a slant, but there still was more of an ethic of like we're reporting kind of like the kind of vanilla plain facts, and now it's all like hyper dramatized. Anyways, this is far afield from Thomas Pynchon. So to get back to that, I definitely want to believe this about Thomas Pynchon, because also it's worth noting that like Thomas Pynchon came from a pretty kind of elite WASPy background. He went to Cornell, right? And I think also to Columbia University. And then he ended up working for various defense contracting, like aerospace manufacturing companies, I think as a technical writer and as a translator. And that's why he ended up in Manhattan Beach, California, in like the 60s and 70s. I think he did work for Boeing for a while and maybe one or two other companies. And I think that actually it's given me a lot of like hope in like literature, because I realized like when I kind of realized that Thomas Pynchon maybe wasn't just this like postmodern jester who is just like filling these like super complex novels with all this ridiculousness.
Like
and
Paul, what's his name? Wow, I'm totally blanking on his name right now. The Infinite Jest guy.
Oh yeah, I was just gonna say David Foster Wallace. I almost got maybe that's the way people treated him. It was like that kind of David Foster Wallace, and like I think there's writer like worship.
Such like a bourgeois, like or Jonathan Franzen. I think that's very much the product of like the MFA type of complex that you talk about, where there's like this very kind of like apolitical like bourgeois sensibility, which is just like bemoaning your ennui or whatever, which is a very reductive way to treat all of David Foster Wallace's writing, but at the same time, like all these like things about like the ironic, the power of irony or whatever, like the ironic grip of the television. I mean, there's some like appeal to that, but like all the stuff like tennis, like who cares? Like like whatever.
Yeah,
like,
I've never been able to. I did buy Infinite Jest years ago, but and I'm kind of, it's like a badge of honor that I was never able to make it past like page like 50 or something, just because it had this vibe about it, and he had this vibe around him.
Yeah, I was like a big like fiction person, like for like when I was young, like when I was doing like writing, it was always like fiction and that type of thing, and I was always drawn to like fiction writing, but like kind of like I feel like it's been very freeing to like kind of like not be so invested in like that stuff, because I just feel like, I don't know, also like the sublimation of like politics into fiction, like I think it's like, and I think Thomas Pynchon, like again, like I have only read Gravity's Rainbow like in high school and like not really like appreciated it as I feel like I would if I read it now. But I think there's people who like do good work in like all sorts of media, but yeah, there's all sorts of issues as well, especially like with the way that people's political sensibilities have been warped, like in accordance with these discourses around the arts. Less so, I guess. The novel, I feel like do people like I'm curious to know like how like well the novel is really doing as a genre. I know people are always bemoaning the death of the novel, and like it doesn't usually turn out to be the case, but I wouldn't be surprised if, like, you know, the novel is kind of like, you know,
I almost don't hear about it anymore because that's how much it is like fallen off the radar. And
maybe it's that TV has like become like of higher quality or artistic prestige, and some of the stigma of TV has fallen away.
That's
and so
definitely
there's this
true.
long form storytelling that can be done in a way where you don't have to read. So maybe that's why the discourse has kind of shifted around like the analysis of like, you know, the you know, racial subversion and like the liberatory politics of Lovecraft Country, or you know, like where that
and
I find that
I'm
to be
even
like,
a victim of that myself. Where I think the introduction of smartphones and then like the sort of quote unquote golden age of TV, which isn't really a golden age anymore. It's like a fool's golden age, basically, but or like a tungsten age of TV. But I think that even I find
it's really
myself
the age of TV is what it is. Like,
it just is. It's not necessarily very good anymore. I think that its production values have improved tremendously, and you have like more kind of the types of people that would have probably been working in theatrical films in like the 80s and 90s and maybe 70s or whatever are now kind of like going into TV affords you kind of, you know, an opportunity to hypothetically do more highbrow work than it used to. It's not just all like goofy sitcoms and stuff, but I do find myself like, you know, reading more like articles. Like I still read a lot. It's like my sort of reading hasn't changed, but my ability to kind of like sit down and like crack a novel has, you know, both new and new is kind of not even on the radar because it's so rare that I find a novel. Occasionally one will come across and I'll read it and I will enjoy that experience. But quickly that phone is just like so much more spectacular and is always like, here's the thing about what's going on right now.
Our attention spans have definitely suffered, and like I think a lot of people struggle with like attention problems. I mean, I'm able to read like long form work, but I don't really read novels so much unless just because like, you know, we're doing the podcast and then I also have like my other academic work which requires me to read like material of a different nature, so like between those things, I mean really like the best you know, chance that I'll like read a novel is that we'll be reading some kind of novel for this podcast in the future, which maybe we'll do. Maybe we'll do opinion
maybe
episode,
it'll force us to do it. Yeah, exactly. Because I think if I really, really committed to it and tried, I could probably read through a novel pretty quickly. It's just like an attention thing, like you said. But like for Pynchon, I mean, I think the cool thing about Pynchon, I think, as somebody who's maybe interested in like conspiracy theories and also in kind of art as like a positive weapon and not in like the bullshitty way that it gets talked about all the time now, but in actually kind of like helping almost in a pedagogical way and like reaching somebody, you know, I think there's a kind of like late modernist kind of you know, masterfulness in Thomas Pynchon's work, which again I have to read more, but I think just the things that like Crypto Cuttlefish pointed out back in the day, that basically there's all these clues embedded in his novel. And it's also worth mentioning that like Thomas Pynchon dropped off the fucking face of the earth in the 70s. He's still alive as far as we know, and I think he lives in New York City. But like even when Inherent Vice the movie came out, I think that, you know, P.T. Anderson was very cagey about saying whether or not he had actually talked to Thomas Pynchon. I think maybe they had like a phone conversation or two or something like that. And, you know, they like talked on the phone. I think he wouldn't like confirm necessarily that he'd even like met him in person. So I think, you know, I think a lot of people have read into that, obviously, and it leads to a certain kind of writerly mystique. Like, why would this guy, like, right after winning, like, either the National Book Award or the Pulitzer, and was, like, a MacArthur Fellow, and kind of could have had this, like, it was still the 70s. Like, he still could have been kind of like a public intellectual kind of person like Norman Mailer or Gore Vidal or somebody like that. But instead he just drops off. But he keeps writing novels, he keeps releasing stuff, and they all have these similar obsessions in them. Like he's obsessed with, and it's worth noting, like he was obsessed with these things before they were made public. You know, things like MK Ultra, Operation Paperclip, like investigations of like parapsychological and like psychoenergetic phenomena, which is like all over gravity's rainbow. Things like ARPANET. Crypto Cuttlefish pointed out that Pynchon always name dropping boysenberry yogurt, which he does a lot in Inherent Vice, like when Dennis orders a pizza topped with boysenberry yogurt. He thinks that is a veiled reference to Walter Knott, the owner of Knott's Berry Farm, who was like a complete right-wing fascist. And actually, I think like boysenberry was like a sort of like eugenics berry that he created. He goes really deep into like how just like the development of like boysenberries like by Walter Knott, who was a huge I forget the name of like the real group that he supported. It might have been John Birch Society, but like in Inherent Vice, it's like it's Vigilant California. So in real life, and of course Orange County is like a frightening right-wing bastion, and Walter Knott, big funder of right-wing causes and things like that, and built the Knott's Berry Farm theme park. So just like little kind of things like that, and talking about MK Ultra, like MK Ultra type stuff, and like LSD, like in the 60s, kind of like right as it was happening. And, I think he wrote V and The Crying of Lot 49 in like the early to mid 60s when all this stuff was popping off. And he did seem, I think it's possible, since he was a translator for Lockheed, and I feel like it was either Cuttlefish, another person who does good, another podcaster who did some good Pynchon deep dives is like Michael S. Judge, who does Death is Just Around the Corner. And I listened to a few of his breakdowns of kind of Pynchon, like reading Pynchon as this kind of left-wing, this coded left-wing, like conspiracy revelation. And they I think have all said that, the possibility that Pynchon was, privy to classified projects, but also if he was made to translate German documents from people like Werner von Braun and like the V2 project, that would have triggered his awareness of the fact that there were all these Nazis working on all of our rocket programs and like working in the military. And maybe he would have seen some of these names and like realized they were like SS war criminals. And it seems like something happened to him that made him really freaked out, and that he perhaps spent the rest of his career. And I think it's really fascinating. Like, it almost never gets like brought up in this way. Whenever you do hear about Pynchon, it's really who he's so postmodern and just like he's so wacky and just like he plays with these ideas of conspiracy theory. But from what I've read of him, I don't get the vibe of like a Robert Anton Wilson of like Illuminatus, where like he was like friends with all the weird MK Ultra people and then goes out and like mixes like conspiracy theories with a bunch of bullshit and is like, you decide, I'm a Discordian. I'm not getting that kind of like merry prankster vibe from Thomas Pynchon. He's still kind of like, he's like very he's very like weird and obsessive, but kind of it's like his eye is on the ball on something, and maybe it's something that's never fully revealed. But I would be inclined, I think to speak more on it, I would have to like actually finish reading all these books. But maybe at a future point we'll try to read more Pynchon.
That might be a good episode.
Chime in.
He's interesting for sure. Yeah,
for sure. Okay, I think we can move on. We're at an hour, number 3.
Yeah, how many are there total that we compiled? 11. All right.
There are 11.
Okay.
Can we the number 4 here is about our grand unified theory of everything. Maybe should we move that to the end because it's like the biggest question? It's the biggest
Yeah, we can maybe bop that to the end, but we still need to do we're on number 3. We haven't done 3. We're on 3.
Sorry, that was just the first 2.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right, so the number 3 is actually Jimmy Fallon Gogg's other question when he said, "I don't care if I'm allowed a second question." Well, I guess you are.
You are.
But just wanted to hear your thoughts on the so-called Project Monarch. Yeah, people here have like 3rd and 4th questions. Anyway, so I wanted to hear your thoughts on the so-called Project Monarch. As far as I can tell, there's no real evidence of it, but it does also seem like there are things like it that exist. Y'all are on some weirder levels than me, so maybe you have further insights. I'm not sure that I really do have further insights on that. I think that what you said maybe is pretty accurate, and that I think like maybe Dimitri, you might know, but as far as I know, I think I could be wrong, but I think that Project Monarch, like the term Project Monarch, like the idea that such a thing existed, originates with Kathy O'Brien. Am I right?
I think so. I just Googled, Project Monarch MK Ultra, and she's like the 3rd hit that pops up. And I think, she basically, it's interesting if you click on Project Monarch, it like redirects you on Wikipedia to Project MK Ultra, which is,
well, I think that like Kathy O'Brien claimed that it was part of MK Ultra.
Yes, exactly. So, and I think maybe,
but
one day...
I actually did, once, do Control F. You can try it now since you're on the page, but, if you Control F through that article for Monarch, Monarch is actually mentioned in that article, as far as I know. So, remember? So, it's interesting that it redirects to MK Ultra. And of course, the article is like, it didn't work, or whatever, it was a massive failure. Despite some conspiracy theories that may circulate.
Bumbling U.S. empire.
Yeah, they're fools.
Caught again, failing.
Yeah, the greatest scientists with the most resources at their disposal. The cutting edge experts in psychology, and
I did see recently that somebody make the point that more money was spent on MK Ultra and its sub-projects than was spent on the Manhattan Project. So did they really just piss all that money away over nothing?
Stupid, dumb, wasteful government. Yeah, just one more reason why we need to cut down on government spending. Anyway,
I think Glenn Greenwald could get behind that.
Yeah, he definitely could. I mean, we definitely should stop government financing of MK Ultra, but
definitely.
Anyway,
but yeah, I think I think one day we will. I think it's we might have to reread whatever Transformation of America.
Well,
which I
Kathy
know...
O'Brien needs to come on the pod. Kathy, if you're listening, please come on. I doubt she's actually listening, but
probably not. But I know she's gone on Ed Opperman's show, and she's been around. I believe her husband Mark Phillips has passed away in the last couple years, and he would usually go on with her, and they would kind of tell their story, but. Just according to the summation of Wikipedia here, for those that don't know, I do think this is the first popularized mention of it was either that or Fritz Springmeier's Illuminati handbook to create a mind-controlled sex slave. Which came out around the same time. But basically, in Transformation of America, O'Brien claims that as a child, she was first sexually abused by her father as well as by a network of child pornographers. Supposedly, she was then forced by the CIA to participate in Project Monarch, which she claims is a subsection of Project MKUltra and Project Artichoke. According to O'Brien, under hypnosis, she was able to recall memories of sexual abuse of both herself and her daughter by international pedophile rings, drug barons, and Satanists, who allegedly used a form of, quote, trauma-based mind control programming to make her a sex slave. O'Brien accuses a wide range of prominent individuals, from American, Canadian, Mexican, and Saudi Arabian government officials to stars of the country and Western music scene, looking at you, Lee Greenwood, of being part of a Project Monarch conspiracy to operate sex slave rings and commit child abuse. For example, O'Brien claims that George H.W. Bush and Miguel de la Madrid used holograms to appear to her in altered forms, saying that Bush apparently activated a hologram of the lizard-like alien, which provided the illusion of Bush transforming like a chameleon before my eyes. In retrospect, I understand that Bush had been painstakingly careful in positioning our seats in order that the hologram's effectiveness be maximized. O'Brien claims Project Monarch
that's a real Mirage Man type of thing. Where
that's
he was
wild.
Pretending to
that's like a
shapeshift.
mini Project Bluebeam.
So it wasn't the alien having a hologram of a human. It was a human having a hologram of an alien having a hologram of a human.
Yes.
Interesting. Okay.
And just the last sentence here. O'Brien claims Project Monarch caused her to develop multiple personality disorder, but during alternate personality episodes, she has photographic recall. O'Brien's transformation of America has been credited as originating, quote, one of the most significant and extreme mind control conspiracy theories, and her claim of links between satanic ritual abuse and MKUltra have influenced popular conspiracy culture. That's pretty much like the long and short of what she said Project Monarch was. And I think, I guess, and that's kind of to this day, I think, the classic idea of like Project Monarch is that a child is subjected to a kind of ritualized torture that is meant to sort of systematically trigger the development of dissociative identity disorder or multiple personality disorder, which is in the DSM. I think we talked on our Quino episode. Like this is a real. Like sometimes people that are like satanic panic debunkers will kind of go off and even question the realness of multiple personality disorder, or they'll make funny movies about it. I think that the understanding
of MPD like as something has changed, like DID and multiple personalities, like. There is like a little bit of there's some misconceptions around how it works, like like me, myself, and Irene or whatever,
exactly,
or like things like that. So or Two-Face or whatever, So like there's definitely like the sort of popular culture misconceptions around this, but and I think that there was some. Revisions to the ideas of it that happened, like in sort of renaming MPD as DID. But
that was in I think the DSM. DSM-5 renamed it, right?
Yeah, and I believe that the idea of alters is still like something that actually like is like clinically used. I might be wrong, but that
is interesting because I remember that Fritz Springmeier used that. He sort of used that. Interesting. I'm looking here that he published the Illuminati formula used to create an undetectable total mind controlled slave in 1996. So he published this like 1 year after Kathy O'Brien published her book, and I guess I think they were probably in contact. But oh my God. Just briefly about Fritz Springmeier. His father, James E. Schuff, worked for the U.S. Agency for International Development as an international agriculturist with a primary focus on developing the Balochistan area of Pakistan.
Oh, wow.
Wow. So spooky background. And he previously had written The Watchtower and the Masons, exposing the relationship between the Jehovah's Witnesses and Freemasonry. I mean, not to go off on him, and he might also deserve his own kind of episode to expose his kind of things. But this is where, those ideas came. And he used the word alters a lot. So I used to think that was kind of it seemed like almost like, oh man, like it sounds like an unscientific term. Like people aren't going to take you seriously when you say like her alters, like Ariana Grande's alters are coming out in this video, But I guess so. It is clinically, it is a clinical term.
It is clinically used, I think.
Interesting. I see here just on the Wikipedia article that I know this is a very rough and controversial estimate, but it is believed to affect about 1.5% of the general population, and 3% of those admitted to hospitals with mental health issues in Europe and North America. And DID is diagnosed about 6 times more often in females than males. And the number of recorded cases increased significantly in the latter half of the 20th century, along with the number of identities claimed by those affected. And it says
there's also stuff like the other kin stuff, like my headmates
or like tulpas.
That's a whole other thing. Egregores. We could definitely do one about tulpas, because that's a whole
I noticed there's a whole Reddit community.
Reddit like Tumblr thing now. I remember because I remember that was like a paranormal thing. like when I was growing up, like super into the paranormal, like but yeah, now it's like a thing where everyone's like, my tulpa is a 6 foot tall Nordic being that tells me like it's okay to be racist or whatever,
people even have like sexual relationships and like romantic relationships with their tulpas.
But anyway, I feel like we should share that. Well, first of all, like trigger warning, like huge trigger warning for what I'm about to read. Like but this is a passage from Kathy O'Brien's book, The Transformation of America, that we've discussed at length in the past.
Oh God, this one. I think I know what you're gonna read.
So this is describing a little retreat that Kathy O'Brien, I guess, went on, around the Mexican border with H.W. Bush and Cheney. Anyway, so drugs were being passed around. I'll just read this part. Heroin, Bush's drug of choice, was in abundance, and Cheney joined him in using it. The smorgasbord of drugs laid out supposedly included opium, cocaine, and Wonderland wafers, MDMA, HA, XTC, aka ecstasy, which indicated to me they intended to celebrate their vacation with abandon. I had seen Cheney stumbling drunk before, but this was the only time I saw him use heroin and give it to me. Kelly, too, was subjected to the drugs. So, yeah, basically she had been, like, programmed extensively, like, before this. They had programmed her with numerous messages pertaining to the immediate opening of the Juarez-Mexican border to free drug and slave trade.
Wow.
Anyway, so, yeah, this is what they had been programming her on. There was lots of leather in this ultra-secret Pentagon bunkhouse with reflecting Cheney's primitive, rustic, and Western preference. Anyway, so Bush attempted to sell Cheney on the idea of pedophilia through graphic descriptions of having sex with Kelly. Both were already sexually aroused from drugs and anticipation. Cheney demonstrated to Bush why he did not have sex with kids by exposing himself to Kelly and saying, "Come here." Upon seeing Cheney's unusually large penis, Kelly reeled back in horror and cried, "No!" which made them both laugh. Bush asked Cheney for his liquid cocaine atomizer as he got up to take Kelly to the bedroom. When Cheney remarked how benevolent it was of Bush to numb her with it before sex, Bush replied, "The hell it is. It's for me." He described his excited state in typical vulgar terms and explained that he wanted it to spray cocaine on his penis to last longer. Cheney said, "I thought it was for the kid." Bush explained, "Half the fun is having them squirm." It's for me is I think for a while Dimitri was just using the words "it's for me" as like a name for HW.
The hell it is. It's for me. I can just imagine him saying that, like, in his weird, like, folksy affect.
It's horrifying. It's horrifying.
I mean, it also mentioned that same passage that basically they were playing a version of the most dangerous game on like a private ranch. And they would hunt these monarch slaves, and if they caught you, then you would be tortured or things like that. I don't think they would normally like kill these people, but it was like if they catch you, they can do horrible things to you.
Yes,
Bush said, and you know what I mean. Honestly, I think that those were allegations. The true scandal, also her detail about Cheney's unusually large penis, is I think been verified. I think elsewhere. I think it's widely known now but I think it was not widely known in the 90s that he had an unusually large penis.
Interesting.
So, I mean,
it says Bush and Cheney were still in their hunting clothes when the programming session began. Bush said, "You and I are about to embark on a most dangerous game of diplomatic relations. This is my game. You will follow my rules. I will have a distinct advantage of hunting you with my eye in the sky, in parentheses, satellite. I'll watch every move you make. As long as you play the game by my rules and make no mistakes, you live. One mistake and I'll get you, my pretty, and your little girl, too.
I'll get you, my pretty. Yeah, I can totally hear him saying all of these words.
You'll die, and Kelly will have to play with me. I prefer it that way. Then it will be her most dangerous game. The cards are stacked in my favor because, well, it is my game. Are you game? There was no choice. I responded as conditioned. Yes, sir, I'm game. No. So yeah. Anyway,
And
that's Monarch.
she says just after that she was taken someplace. She was taken for emergency repairs, not to a hospital or mental institution, but to a brain-mind research and development lab on the U.S. Army reservation at Presidio to be, quote, repaired by Lieutenant Colonel Michael Aquino.
Oh, God.
And, I think we could go off, for a while here, but
again,
I think...
all of these questions could be an episode.
I think I do have so many questions for Kathy O'Brien, and I'd also like to know what the deal is with, Bryce Taylor, who's the other person who's, very similar. I think she wrote Thanks for the Memories, where she implicates a lot of the same people, but also primarily Bob Hope.
Thanks for the Memories is a hilarious, ironic title for,
which is... it's because it's, Bob Hope's, I guess, the catchphrase or something. Mm-hmm. And Bob Hope was her handler. Bob Hope, big fan of, USO tours and, supporting the troops and, plugged in guy like that. So I think that Project Monarch, and of course we have one mention of it from a high-ranking individual, which was former CIA Director William Colby saying to John DeCamp in the aftermath of the Franklin scandal in Omaha, which I think we probably had to do that episode next month if we mention it nearly every episode. But he basically said something along the lines, I think he was talking, John DeCamp asked him about Project Monarch, and he gave some kind of strange evasive answer I don't know much about Monarch. I'm pretty sure that was stopped in the 70s. And kind of gave a curt answer that acknowledged that there was something called Project Monarch, but was quick to say that was shut down. And was a little bit kind of sus and say what you want, but William Colby did end up dead, I think in either 95 or 96, found floating in the Chesapeake Bay under very strange circumstances. And that's...
the symbol of the monarch butterfly is interesting as well.
I think the music video, the Vigilant Citizen kind of connection of, this modern thing of looking at music videos... I really would encourage anybody to go to that website and just look at the last 10 videos Ariana Grande has done. And why, and then other artists too. I mean, Vigilant Citizen curates a pretty good collection of things that have sus themes in them. And there's always these new artists coming out, we talked in the last episode about these new 18-year-old rappers 666 tattooed all over their faces and with black contacts in to look like the guitarist from Limp Bizkit, they're demonically possessed. And there's just the repetition of themes and symbols in these videos, and these are all coming out from basically the same handful of record labels and media conglomerates. So it's not even that much anymore. It's not even that far of a stretch that they would kind of have certain, I don't know, they'd want all their artists to put a certain thing in a video. But it's kind of bizarre that there's so much. I mean, I think in No Tears Left to Cry, which was the first big video Ariana Grande released after the very sus Manchester concert bombing, where her concert was blown up by some, quote unquote ISIS jihadi who MI6 had a relationship with and had let him come back and forth from Libya and I think Syria and all that stuff. And, so No Tears Left to Cry was kind of her comeback after that. And there's literally a scene where she's sitting in front of a mirror and there's all these different masks of her face, a CGI version of her face. And she's taking off her face and putting on another face. And the camera's going upside down. So it's invert. And just she's putting on her alternate personalities. And... just so many things are there's butterflies, there's there's girls are being they're being tortured by demons. All the Billie Eilish videos are like this. There's all it's it doesn't make sense why they're so fucking creepy. Billie Eilish is so sus. Why? It's fine, she's talented or whatever, but the aesthetic of her video, which she also, I remember for a long time on her Instagram when she was first getting popular, the amount of people she followed was always 666.
Who's? Billie Eilish?
Billie Eilish.
Well, yeah. Well, she's like got like a dark like persona, you know.
Yeah,
so,
but
yeah,
I mean, her videos almost feel like look at me, I'm a monarch slave, like I'm getting choked by hands that are popping in
I feel
from
like
out of the screen. My nose is bleeding.
If you buy into the full like Vigilant Citizen thing, like every single video is gonna be like I'm a monarch slave, like which maybe I don't know, but like you know,
it's just you think they would have moved on to a different kind of thematic template by now in pop music instead of just getting progressively darker and spookier and like more like satanic.
It's definitely more satanic. I mean, it's true. I mean, we were just talking in our other episode about Saw Baby or whatever, you know. Yeah, and it like you know, one thing that I definitely wanted to say relative to that is that like, you know, as like spooky and as dedicated to like the image of being like satanic as like a lot of those you know, Memphis horrorcore rappers were, like none of them went so far as to have like an upside down cross with 666 like on each like point tattooed on their head.
That's true. That's like, which is kind of interesting, right?
Really something.
Like,
I mean, that really is where the mark of the beast is supposed to be, on the forehead. So he's really committing to it. But I mean, it doesn't have anything to do with that. It's unknownism. Okay. How dare you?
This has nothing to do with Saint Peter.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
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 So
I'm reading,
I mean that
the true disturbing meaning of WAP right now.
Oh God. Yeah, I can only imagine.
What is the true disturbing meaning? You know, Russell Brand posted a video on social media entitled "Feminist Masterpiece Are Porn," in which I like how he blocked out the word the O in porn. Anyway, he asked if feminism, blah blah blah. You know, Russell Brand. But okay, so. Visual arts are based in symbolism, and symbols have the power to convey profound meanings that go beyond the limitations of words, because beyond the butts and the breasts, there's a lot of symbolism going on in the video, and that symbolism is telling a story so vivid that it renders all the debate described above useless. The video is about slavery. It is about mind control. It is about sexual exploitation for the elite. It's all there, but conveyed through symbolism.
Did Russell Brand say this?
I guess no. Russell Brand like criticized the video for being like, you know, like a capitalist, like objectification disguised as feminism, I guess. But
interesting.
You know, Vigilant Citizen is the one who's saying that it's all about symbolism, like
it's about being a slave. I mean, aren't they dressed up as cats and like leopards and kittens and stuff in it?
He's saying
or they're wearing little cat ears.
Well, he breaks down the whole video, starting with. Kali, you know, he's saying that in the beginning there's like these two statues where I guess Cardi B and you know,
Megan Thee Stallion,
like Megan Thee Stallion are back to back, like, you know, and he's saying that you know, that's reminiscent of a statue of Kali. I don't really see it necessarily, but I guess because, like, you know, between them they have 4 arms, so that's kind of like Kali.
Okay,
I don't know, but
yeah.
Yeah, anyway.
I would just go on the record and say WAP is sus.
Yeah.
I think it's
wet
sus.
Ass P word.
Yeah, wet ass P word.
Yeah,
you know,
anyway, this is like an endless article, but
okay.
yeah,
so we could go back to it, go back to that later, but yeah, I think that's our thoughts on Project Monarch. We will tackle it really in depth at a later date.
Yeah, certainly we will, certainly.
I can be cool if you just wanna be mad. I can be
our fifth question from Trolley Snatcha, who writes, I would like to hear Dimitri and Khalid's take on the whole pandemic thing. Did they wash their grocery shopping and deliveries like Robbie Martin? Speaking of whom, do they think this is a current day 9/11?
Well, I think that there's definitely some parallels to 9/11 in terms of, like, the general mood and the state of emergency, but I think that, like, it's also, like, a very different thing, like, by its nature. I think we kind of talked about this before. Like, there's no... Even though there certainly was an ambiguous enemy, and the threat after 9/11 was expanded to include, like, you know, all sorts of people who didn't really have any material connection to 9/11, but... This is a different order. It's like a totally different, like, thing conceptually, and also the transformation of our lives has been different, and you know, it's been of a different nature. There's certainly similarities, like you know, the sort of heightened vigilance, like the controlled surveillance. But I think that, I mean, this is of a different order. This is, in terms of the transformation of our day-to-day lives, like, it's worse.
Yeah,
you know, and
orders of magnitude greater.
The psychic effects are different, but I would say more extreme, because you know, the environmental changes are so much greater. Like, you know, we've talked in our past podcasts about the fear around 9/11, but there's also the fear around the omnipresence of, like, the virus, of the social transformations that might ensue as a result. So, do I think this is the current day 9/11? Like, in some ways, but you know, I mean, is that meant to ask, like, do I think it's a pandemic in the way that, like, 9/11 might have, like, other things? I mean, I definitely think the virus is real.
Yes.
Do I think that, like, there's definitely, like, you know, there's definitely a space of interpretation that happens in terms of, like, how to approach the virus. And we have seen, you know, I often mention that I remember early on, you know, believing in the virus was right-wing. And, you know...
It almost flipped a few times.
Yeah, I think it's just absurd, and so it's annoying to me that it's politicized at all. Like, I just wish that we could just comply with, like, the idea of, like, you know, just trying to be conscientious within reason about, like, this virus. But, like, yeah, I do remember... Like, so you can definitely see how, like, there's a social component to it. It's not just people who are, like, rationally observing, you know, the virus and reacting accordingly. In terms of the groceries, like, I actually think that at least my GF did early on, you know, disinfect the groceries, but I think that quickly, you know, because people didn't know what was necessary or whatever, like, or very early on. I didn't even hear about that, but, you know, we don't do it anymore, but, like, you know, I still, like, kind of more or less I'm quarantined, you know, like, when the rest of society gets back together, like, I will as well, I guess, but yeah, I still, like, observe it, you know, I wear a mask, etc. So yeah.
I think I went through kind of a kind of twisty journey, and I think my feelings towards the pandemic have kind of evolved, you know, over the months. I think that at the beginning, because, like you said, so much was not known about it, and it, you know, it's like its ease of transmission, its gain of function, if you will, was so damn high, and there were all these different, you know, news accounts coming out about, you know, it can live on surfaces for up to 2 weeks, and there definitely was maybe a month or two in the beginning where I was, like, spraying down, like, door handles, and I was wearing gloves to the grocery store. I don't think I ever wiped down my groceries. I think I felt intuitively that, you know, I'm not eating the plastic wrapper on the groceries, so, you know, like, it's probably unlikely, and if I'm gonna, like, cook something, it'll probably kill it. But I definitely was kind of like, I would, you know, use, you know, hand sanitizer after kind of going in and out of, like, every single store that I went to, actually to the point where maybe in, like, mid to late April, like, my hands started to get, like, chapped from, like, putting on too much hand sanitizer. And then I think that was a point where, like, it was actually painful. Like, my hands were, like, red and like puffy and, like, fucked up, and I started to think, okay, like, maybe I don't have to do this. And I think, you know, now I don't wear gloves. I mean, you have to wear a mask in California. or in LA County to go to a grocery store, so I'll wear the mask. And I think even the mask itself, I felt, it's like, like I noticed in the beginning when you couldn't get a mask because they were all sold out, and people like Dr. Fauci were going on TV, and I was kind of listening to like NPR in the car, and everybody was telling you not to wear a mask, and that like masks don't protect you against this, and all these other things. But then I almost sensed at the time, and they almost admitted this without any kind of consequences later on, that like, oh yeah, we kind of like made that up, like that, masks don't help because we didn't want there to be a run on PPE because we needed to get it to hospital workers. It's like, okay, on the one hand I get that, but like maybe don't fucking lie to people about the science of it right out the masks.
Gate. Yeah, but I mean, I guess you're in a tough situation there because like even if you say like don't please out of compassion or like put your civic duty first, like then
I can understand that.
Listen, everyone's gonna have a reason why they need a mask, So
and that was kind of first. That was kind of first
but
indication
it's also
to me.
Up to lie. Yeah, like,
that was kind of first indication to me that like certain games were being played, and the posture of the CDC and like the federal government, kind of like a pandemic response, like even separate from kind of the whole like partisan kind of thing, because it wasn't. It's gotten more partisan like throughout the summer and fall, but back in the spring, it's like Trump was kind of going along with taking it kind of seriously. I mean, but yeah, that propensity to think that like the people can't handle the truth, so you just have to kind of psyop them in like a benign way to doing whatever like the experts. You can't cause a panic, and then they reverse themselves, and now like wearing a mask is like this religious kind of act that you have to do, where if you're like not wearing a mask, it is seen, I mean, or, inversely, if you go to other parts of the country, more rural parts of the country, if you're wearing a mask, it's like, take that muzzle off, and that kind of attitude. And I remember feeling very caught in the middle, and maybe in the kind of late spring, early summer, where it did kind of feel like, I think maybe I was more of a mind at first that like, I kind of thought that, I was almost like pro-mask before like the CDC was like saying to wear masks, because I thought, well, wearing if all we have to do is like wear masks when we go out into like enclosed spaces and stuff, then maybe we don't need to like shut down the entire economy. Because then, there were people that were kind of, there are people that I know on Twitter that were kind of started a couple months into this, started to really turn against the idea of wearing, mandatory masks and shutting down everything. And I think in retrospect now, like I have to kind of give them some credit for noticing like the absolutely terrible social and psychological and economic cost of shutting down the entire economy. I think I've kind of evolved. I was sitting back and kind of observing for a while. I think I really couldn't kind of figure out like what is the kind of the right stance to take here. But now that we're like 7 months into partial lockdown in most of the metropolitan areas in the country, and I've just had to live it and see how everybody else is like living it, and all the things that happen in normal life, like like if a family member gets sick, like you can't like just go over and take care of them anymore. It becomes this whole thing where like, oh, you're gonna bring the virus, and then people have to be alone in the hospital and things like that, and it really does raise the cost. And then, of course, like the economic depression, I thought it was interesting. I was very surprised that they rolled out these generous unemployment benefits, which have like allowed me to survive, frankly, and like the stimulus checks and things like that. Because I basically got like laid off at the beginning of the pandemic, and from sort of like my day job, if you will, and it hasn't come back. And, it was almost like, wow, like Republicans and Democrats just got together and like dumped a bunch of money into people's accounts. Like that's, what it's almost like, like what is behind this sudden generosity when this is something that they kind of never would do under normal circumstances? And in a way, are they kind of I think I saw somebody on Twitter the other day kind of explain that like those $1,200 stimulus checks were equivalent to like the $1,500 that the Dutch paid to like the tribe in Manhattan to like sell them the island, and because if they didn't offer them anything, it's like something to kind of buy our acquiescence while they pump like trillions of dollars into the Federal Reserve, and then companies like Amazon.
Yeah, it's
like
not
now,
sufficient. Like, like the people who are thriving more and more are like the billionaires. They haven't suffered from this. Like
they have incredibly increased their wealth throughout this thing. So now it's like we have enough data to kind of look at these things. And I have to say now that I think it's still a complicated question of like, I can't say I'm sold on necessarily just like, let's open back up and just like let the chips fall where they may, but I do look at some of the countries right now that are implementing like what I view as kind of like psychotic level lockdowns, like particularly for some reason Australia and New Zealand, the things I've been seeing coming out of there, where it's like like you can't travel to like the next territory or province, like you just can't go anywhere without like papers, and then like if you were I believe it's like if you were, contact traced to like have come in contact with somebody who tested positive, like you're supposed to self-report to like a hotel for like 14-day quarantine.
Yeah, the whole like track and trace stuff is really something.
Yeah, and that video of the woman who organized kind of like an anti-mask protest at like, the City Hall Square, and then these like detectives come to her apartment and are like, off you go now, like you're under arrest, and they take this like 4-month-old, the 4-month pregnant woman who's like about to go to a sonogram appointment. They like drag her off, and she's like, I'll delete it off Facebook. Like I'll cancel the event. And they're like, too late for that, I'm afraid. And and there's like there's like a gigantic kind of like heavy with them who's like kind of like looking at the husband and like, you all right, man? You all right? Crazy. Like, like just so kind of aggressive. And then when I saw all these things happening, and I saw like, total lockdown for 6 weeks, like curfew from like 8 p.m. to 6 a.m. like you can only go outside for 90 minutes for exercise or essentials, and you'll get arrested if you don't. And then I looked at like what the case numbers were for like New Zealand and parts of Australia, and it was like in like Wellington, New Zealand, it's like there were like 300 cases of COVID and like 15 deaths or something like that, which is like sitting in LA, which didn't get hit the hardest, but we still have had like thousands and thousands of deaths, and we are like on a kind of half lockdown. And maybe some people would criticize that like they didn't go far enough, but it's like, whoa, hold on, like you guys, like you get 3 positive test results from like a school and you shut down the entire metropolitan area for like a month. Like that seems completely outrageous. And
I mean, no one like knew how to deal with this, I feel like. I mean, there were some places that were like, we're just gonna deal with it, people's approaches obviously shifted over time. Like, I mean, it's incredibly, I mean, I don't know. Yeah, I don't envy anyone whose job it is to like figure out how to like deal with this virus and like to overcome the pandemic or flatten the curve. I mean, certainly in America, I mean, I saw some posts of like, a big like Halloween parade thing, and it's just like, I will say like something that did give me a little bit of whiplash was the commentary around the protests. I mean, I fully support the protests, like, in terms of, like, their goals, and, like, complete, like, support. I even, like, think that, like, some of the looting of certain, places, is fine, because it's, like, straight up just, like, reappropriating resources that exist. It makes sense in a way. Not, of course, like, your many own small business or whatever, but, like, maybe CVS. But
looting, like, the Beverly Center was kind of like, well, like, it is what it is. But
the
also,
thing that
I don't know.
the thing that kind of gave me a little bit of whiplash was like the shift in the kind of narratives around like I remember it was like stay the fuck inside,
yes,
like literally home. One day stay the fuck home, one day, and then it was like, if you're not like out in the streets like putting your body like in front of a bullet to like save a POC, like you're bad. Like, well, it's
you're
like,
a
well,
fascist.
Yeah, like, well,
yeah,
like,
no,
just yesterday you were saying that I was evil for going outside.
Yes.
Now you're saying that I'm evil for being inside. Like,
and I know
like,
that, I think you can't ignore that as a part of like a certain development of like the hyper politicization of the virus itself.
Yeah, it's totally. And I understand that, like, by virtue of being, like, liberals, the people involved in those protests probably were more mindful of the virus and, like, probably, like, were more likely to wear masks than people at a Trump rally or whatever. Or,
For sure. I mean, I went to...
Try to social distance,
I think I went to one local action during, I think, back in June. And I would say, I mean, it was also... It was outdoors. I remember remarking at the time that, even all the kind of right-wing people, like I said, even if you don't like that people are getting out in the streets and doing everything, like they might actually be doing you kind of a favor, and maybe you should, because it's almost like they're willing to go out and be guinea pigs to see how much does coronavirus spread and how bad will it be if thousands of people like go out into the streets. And of course, yes, some of them will be wearing masks, but some won't. But that's just kind of realistic, right? I mean, if you go to any public place, like not everybody's gonna be wearing them outside, and maybe we could find out maybe how intense this is.
But were we able to find out? Because like it was hard to tell. Like it's hard to say like what impact that had. And there's also other events that are like when people saw that, like people reacted by saying like, well, I'm not going to observe this either. Like, and like those protests by far were the most legitimate reason to go outside, like, or to gather in mass. And I think that some of this, like, people like saying like, well, it's all like, white supremacy is also a health risk. Like, yes, that's true. But the virus, like, statistically kills people of color more because, like, that's just the nature of the racist aspect. Like, so, like, and did those protests ultimately, like, stop white supremacy or make, like, meaningful progress? Like, I guess in a way, like, maybe, but I don't know. Like, not to be cynical or, like, diminish, like, the important, like, work that people do, or like the need to make their voices heard, like against these horrible systems of oppression that exist, like, and that are deeply rooted in our society. But like, I don't know, at my I just feel like I've become a bit cynical about like the efficacy of protests, like, and the but
I definitely felt that. I felt like none of the lessons of really the last 50 years on the left's kind of track record of effectively protesting have been internalized and kind of appreciated, and everyone runs to the barricades in a kind of like social media hive mind, and there's no strategy, organization kind of behind it, and it's all very focused on affect and just almost this mystical power. I mean, it's like so many...
And there were many religious... This is becoming about the process, but there were definitely like very religious aspects of it. It was like, a spiritual experience and a spiritual expression for many people, which, I think is something that also the pandemic has. I mean, everyone associates, like, when you think of the Black Death, what do you picture? You picture, like, the churches, the censors, like, and I think that there's some truth to that. Like, it has a sort of, it makes you think of your mortality, which, of course, makes you become more spiritual. And I think that for some people, that is like a spiritual expression, which is, there's a tradition of that in the United States, and I think that's a good and legitimate expression of spirituality. But yeah, like it just kind of goes to show like the way that the sort of treatment of it by the commentariat shifted. It shows like how the virus isn't like a brute object. It's employed for various purposes.
Yes, and that's actually what I think. Maybe that's kind of where I'm at nowadays. That is like, I think the debate has been settled that For the most part, I don't see very many people arguing anymore that like literally coronavirus like doesn't exist. Like that's not very. I think even among very like conspiratorial people, that doesn't have a lot of currency anymore. I think we all can acknowledge like there is such a thing that floats around that's called coronavirus that you can like test for. But I think a lot of the controversy now is more about like to what extent is it deadly? Like what is its real mortality rate? And on top of that, like how many like what rate of kind of like death is kind of the tripwire, the red line beyond which we have to like shut down the entire economy. Because like
I actually think some of what we're talking about might pertain a little bit to question 7. I actually like think maybe we should put question 7 before question 6.
Okay. Yeah.
KT Che KTCHE asks, sort of on the topic of COVID, but also Thiel adjacent. I'm curious if you have thoughts about the several years worth of, quote, luxury tech bunker articles that seem to be rolled out every few months starting in 2017 or so. When they were rolling out, they seem to be received by journalists / Brooklyn types as like, look at these annoying tech billionaires. I do like the identification of journalists / Brooklyn types because it's definitely just like, it is definitely a type. Anyway, with a dash of, quote, luxury porn gawking. But in retrospect, I find it interesting how those articles kind of prefigured the concept of, quote, lockdown for the masses. It's almost like they painted the concept of lockdown as this luxury aspirational thing. So what I think is interesting relative to this, like before getting into the like issue of the luxury bunkers, the thing is that like the fact that those billionaires were getting those bunkers attests to the fact that like what I kind of wanted to raise in response to your point just now, which is that none of this would have happened if the infrastructure for it to be like doable weren't already in place. Like if this were the 50s, like we wouldn't have a lockdown because we wouldn't have the internet. We wouldn't have ways for people to work from home.
True.
Like, it's only because it's possible for this to happen. Like, and that people have in some way, like there have been forces moving towards this, sort of change for a while. And the virus is something that made it happen, but like, there's all this scaffolding all, underneath it that makes it possible. Like if we didn't have the ability to work from home in the way that we do, like if we didn't have then
100%. 100%.
It would be very, very different. It would be,
Yeah. And I think like going back to, they've kind of tried to push that for years, ever since like, they came out with like the iPad, and like Steve Jobs wanted to like give one to, he wanted an iPad for every school child, which now we realize like doing medical research is like not good, not healthy. And things like that. But I think in this regard, it is like 9/11, in which it made a whole host of things that were previously would have been unthinkable, incredibly thinkable, and in fact like logical and necessary if you're looking at the quote unquote kind of facts. And I think especially right now, I think that if you go look back on the graphs, like the early spring when this first hit was legitimately like whether you could litigate if it was their kind of the real reason for this, but like a lot of people died in the early spring, particularly in Europe and in the like northeastern United States. But the rate of deaths has like, even though it is going up a little bit, kind of as predicted, it's nowhere near the amount that it was back in the spring, even though the case numbers are kind of getting back up there. But all that really tells you is that probably more young, healthy people are getting it and not dying from it, which would kind of make sense that we're all, around the country, we're kind of like half locked down. A lot of people are getting antsy and stuff like that. But it's like, I'm looking at like the chart of Australia right now of all time. And, like they had their all-time death toll on September 4th of this year, and it's gone down tremendously since then. Do you know what their record one day death total was?
No, what was it?
For the severe lockdown response, 59 people.
Wow.
More than 59 people on average die every day in Los Angeles County from COVID. And we're like kind of half, locked down, whatever. But like the kind of okay, so I think like now I'm starting to see a real moving of the goalposts. Like I watched a segment the other night, which is it's hard for me to like stand watching cable news like particularly this month, but it was like the Brian Williams show on MSNBC, and he was using these kind of linguistic tricks that that were basically like, America reached a grim milestone today of like the most single new reported cases since like early May, and what he said was like, we've just seen like the most recorded cases per day since early May, back when deaths were, back when people were dying at a rate of like, 5,000 or 10,000 or something like that. But then he only showed the graph of cases. He didn't show the graph of deaths, because that would show that even though the cases had spiked, that the deaths had not spiked as much. But he was kind of making a sneaky kind of assertion without technically lying. It basically saying the cases are as high as they were back here when the deaths were X amount, which was very high. But he's not pointing out that, like, the deaths, like, you'd think on a newscast that may, and of course, I'm not that naive. Like, of course he's not going to say this, but like, you think on a newscast, maybe you would want to dig into those numbers and kind of go, what's the reason for this? Like, why aren't more people dying? Maybe it's because more young people are getting it, and like, maybe we should debate. But no, like, that's not, they're pushing a line. Another really egregious thing is, I remember early in this year, I looked a lot at the kind of, maybe a lot of people have, the, like the COVID-19 dashboard sick map from Johns Hopkins University, which has, these red dots all over the world and every other country. And basically, you can track all the global data kind of, in real time. And they were sharing, Brian Williams was like, he has this whole segment based around like an image that was tweeted by some other public health, like, professional from like Yale or something. And they said, it was all about how Canada has handled the coronavirus like so much better than America, because maybe they have a enlightened, cool prime minister and not a disgusting orange man who hates science, et cetera, et cetera. And they said, like, if you want to see like the most informative and evocative graph or line anywhere, like, I'll tell you what it is. It's the 3,000-mile border between Canada and the United States. And it showed this thing that I'm looking at right now from the Johns Hopkins sick map. And what you basically see is that the United States is just like completely infested with like big red dots like all over the place. Yeah. And then you look up to Canada, and there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 like basically dots in Canada. And when I looked at this, and like, it doesn't take a rocket scientist, but I knew from looking at this map like earlier on in the year that there was kind of a little bit of basically different countries started reporting their numbers in more specificity based on cities or states or provinces and counties and things like that. So basically what I immediately noticed was, like, I looked and there's only 7 dots in Canada, and there's like dots all over the US. I know they switched months ago to reporting US cases by county. So therefore, like, there's going to be a lot of large and small dots all around the country, and they're going to be kind of all over the place. But then I thought, how much would I bet that Canada is still only reporting by the province, and that's why there's 7 dots? And I looked, and sure enough, like, they're still reporting by the province. So every dot is representing like all of Saskatchewan, all of Alberta, all of Ontario. And I think, granted, they're doing better, but Ontario has had 79,000 cases and 3,195 deaths. Quebec has had 106,000 cases and 6,272 deaths. I don't know what like I think America, is doing worse in a kind of like per capita level, but like, that is such an obvious thing that it's like, okay, you cannot use this as a visual comparison because it's not showing the same type of data. It's like showing province data. Like, if you looked at this map and it was all 50 states reporting, there'd still be like bigger dots, but it wouldn't look as like radical. But like, that's and then they had like their Dr. Gupta, who's like a young guy who, like, Brian Williams was gushing about how he has like degrees from like Princeton and Yale and Oxford, and he has enough free time to moonlight in the Air Force Reserve. And I was just like, oh, wow. Fuck this guy. But then he was like, yeah, that's right, Brian. Brian. That's right. This picture is evocative, and it shows you like how, you know, countries that don't have a disgusting orange president basically can like handle these pandemics with science and reason much better. And, you know, it was just kind of like, why do you have to do this? Like, you guys are fucking around, and it's like an easily discoverable kind of thing that you're like playing a little kind of like statistical trick on people by exaggerating the difference between when Canada, it's like, yeah, they've done like marginally better, but like they still are dealing with it a lot. And I don't know what the state of their lockdowns are right now, but it's just like that kind of like sneaky, insincere, like dishonest, and not even very sophisticated like propaganda, basically, because right now it's obvious that the agenda is to hype how bad Corona is like going into the election.
Right, of course, yeah.
And like, you know, so I really do wonder now, like with the pandemic, like where is it going to go from here, depending on who wins. I am kind of like being brought around now that I'm seeing stuff like that Great Reset issue of Time magazine that came out that had all these articles from like a weird like Japanese insurance company that was writing op-eds for it for some reason, and like the head of the World Economic Forum, what's his name, Schwab, basically kind of making this weird argument that we need to like abandon capitalism in favor of kind of like a weird like technocratic globalism that is probably still basically capitalism, but like much more invasive and controlling and stuff like that. And, you know, they spent a whole thing, you know, talking about how coronavirus has, you know, created this golden opportunity to like reformulate the global economy, to like fight climate change and fight future pandemics, and how, you know, capitalism was great. It even says in one article, like, capitalism was designed to meet human needs. It's like, okay. Sure it was.
It was designed to meet the needs of certain humans. Yeah.
Very small coterie of mammon worshippers. And
so like to meet the needs of Jin. Anyway.
So I think I'm definitely one. And then I maybe earlier this summer I kind of thought that if Joe Biden wins, is like the pandemic we're gonna undergo another whiplash like right afterwards?
Oh,
which
yeah,
is like,
for sure. It's gone as soon as he gets in.
But I wonder, is it gone because it's still such a valuable tool?
Yeah, maybe. I don't know.
In a way, it's kind of okay. So think of it this way: it's kind of like, even though it took a longer span of time, like 7 years after 9/11, Obama comes into the White House, and I think maybe a lot of people thought, you know, not even in a cynical way, that like the war on terror paradigm is going to shift now. That like a different party came into power, even though it's a little different because like the Democrats like are kind of. They're the ones kind of hyping coronavirus the most, whereas like the Republicans were hyping the war on terror more.
Right.
But in a way, it's kind of like the Republicans are almost like in the position the Democrats were in the 2000s of kind of like maybe like there's like some slight ambivalence about fully going along with this, but like for the most part they went along with it.
And also, like, yeah, it's kind of like, you know, the Democrats, like, had to be anti-war because Bush was, like, you know, the creator of the war. So there was more incentive to be, like, a little bit more anti-war. But, yeah, they were kind of, like, mostly ambivalent. Like, they were, you know...
I mean, they mostly voted to start the war. So,
yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So it'll be interesting to see where it goes. It's hard for me to make a prediction at this point.
Yeah, it is hard to say. I mean, I do want to go back to the library. I wonder, like, I don't know, yeah, it's almost hard to conceive, like, how this has gone on for so long that, like, it could just go away, but part of me does wonder if, like, once, you know, well, I guess once Biden's in, there's no real need, at least in the immediate term, to make it look like he has solved everything. So, I don't know. We'll see.
I think he's got some time to work with it, but I feel like they're already cooking up these kind of like sinister quote-unquote solutions to like get to finally like beat the pandemic that are going to be very invasive and
it doesn't matter to them if we can go to the library. They don't want us going to the library.
They definitely don't. They definitely do not. Just go in your Zoom class where like your eyeballs can be surveilled by algorithms.
Yeah, just make sure that you're paying attention, while you hear about, you know, whatever.
So, okay. Should we move
while
on?
You get taught about, like, the, you know, the liberatory power of, like, Avengers, Part 5, like, Captain America, like, destroys, you know, the Soviet master.
Who am I? I'm confused, bored and ain't got shit to do. So I grab my hockey mask and my tools to scope out food. If you slip, then you're mine. I'ma creep up from behind. The only thing my victim sees the reflection from my chrome 9. Drop it off, quick you dig. I commit robbers like Billy the Kid. If you refuse, then you lose. They give me a reason to split your wig. But if he runs, damn, that's dumb. You really gon' have to give me some. Once in the leg, once in the head, twice in the chest, and twice in the arm. I bet that's stung, but he has no response because he's paralyzed. Won't you just close your eyes? Stop trying to fight, cause sooner or later you die. Stankin' brings out the best in me. Fuck it and juices, I'm hungry for keys. Fuck it, I call up my posse. Let's rock the Colombians coming from overseas. There's plenty of G's, thousands of G's. That is how you make your money fast. For your health, protect yourself, and don't forget to grab your mask. Don't forget to grab your mask. Stay protected, unexpected, that's the way your ass gon' last.
Fall into a twilight zone, forces leave my head alone. Feeling for my green, I grab my mask, my lows, my big back tone. Drop it off, all your cash, look in the eyes of the motherfucking man.
Yeah. Should we move on
we'll
to our
6A and 6B?
6A, 6B from Bissell.
Or Bissell. I hope we're pronouncing his name right. Anyway.
I just think of like Richard Bissell, the CIA guy, not saying you're related. Bissell,
Anyway, So, he asks, since you were following the Epstein story for quite a while before it blew up, I'm wondering if you have thoughts on why it came to the mainstream when it did, because I would think if they really wanted to, they could have quashed the Miami Herald story that ultimately led to his arrest. I know they can't always keep a tight lid on the news, but it kind of makes me think maybe there's a reason they wanted it public, either as a show of force, yes, we openly associate with sex traffickers, it helps cement our power and there's something you can do about it, or as a general insanity-inducing psyop. And he asks as a follow-up, also, is Epstein actually dead? I feel like not many of the researchers have really grappled with the possibility of a body switch or just wheeling out Epstein himself, made up to look strangled for the NY Post photographer. I've heard rumors of that Epstein's body was cremated, which seems uncharacteristic at best. It at least neatly explains why there was no dead man switch, and you would think they'd like to be able to wheel him out alive and well to show any new young proto-Epsteins they'll be looked after.
Yes. On that last point, I am open to the idea that I did see that New York Post picture, but I mean, in a place like that, like it's definitely not inconceivable that they could do some kind of extraction like that, and they would have to dress him up as like dead for the authorities to be able to kind of sign off on it, and I think even if
even a body switch is conceivable, like
exactly, they could have found somebody.
It's not inconceivable.
It's not
in the
for
world
somebody.
In the conspiracy verse, it's quite like down to earth as these things go. I think to conceive that, I think that kind of thing probably has been done before. And in various like contexts, and this could be one.
It often gets into authority territory when you talk about famous people like faking their own death. I think there's something that just feels kind of like hard
Elvis
to believe
alive,
about that. Tupac.
Well, he is the greatest rapper alive, according to Kamala, who I guess she's been talking to the most worshipful David Henry. She knows that he's still out there.
R.I.P. And but I think it is kind of interesting, especially for somebody like Epstein, where I did have that thought, like after he died. That,
on the other side of the coin, maybe he's just so disposable to I feel like he was ultimately like a middleman kind of, he was like the guy who was meant almost to take the fall in a way. I don't know, but
it does make you wonder kind of about like the whole idea of a dead man switch and whether or not, I mean, we talked in a past episode about like Barry Seal and how he was an asset that
almost like probably maybe on a similar kind of like rank in like the sort of Iran-Contra enterprise sense of like, he was like kind of a colonel or something like that, where he's not like the big dog, but he was doing a lot of ops for them and knew a lot of sensitive things. And like, it was when he started to threaten George H.W. Bush that he got a hit put out on him. But there haven't really been any stories coming out, from the time that like he was in jail that basically alleged that he was like willing to flip on anybody. We didn't really hear, despite all these stories from like Daily Beast and the Miami Herald and stuff like that. And even, like I think the fact that like the dam broke on Jeffrey Epstein after a kind of like broad imposed like silence about him for so many years was kind of, I was surprised as somebody who kind of discovered like the Epstein whole narrative maybe in like 2014. And then kind of even through most of 2016, it was like not allowed to be a topic. And then, you watch like two people that basically had these like very close connections with him, dueling against each other for president. And then even in like Pizzagate, it didn't really come out and stuff. And then suddenly it's like, bam, Epstein gets popped. And, these things do come out that he's like, Acosta said that, he belonged to intelligence and things like that. And it's like, it's much to my surprise, kind of, it was like rolled out in a way that kind of normies could wrap their head around. But I feel like maybe that's gone too far now, and it's become just another like salacious true crime story. There's like so many podcasts, including one that we've like subtweeted repeatedly, but even less than, even just kind of more like salacious, like CNN headline news style, like Lifetime Network style, like Dirty Rich on Netflix, and like the pervert and the prince and stuff. But they're all going more on this like kind of, it's very kind of personality based and kind of just talking about, I even feel that I've been watching some of the Twitter activity of like some of the public victims that are, like Virginia Giuffre and how like she was like retweeting QAnon stuff, and I don't know, like it just kind of it's entered into this thing where it's like it seems like we're not really gonna get much more. Like they released the Ghislaine Maxwell deposition and it didn't really seem to have anything important in it. And now she probably has a better odds of like claiming, getting a mistrial because she can claim that there's like a prejudice, the jury is inherently prejudiced because she's been such a big media figure. There's a lot of kind of problems with that. And then,
the questions like didn't, there weren't like, there's like a slight mention of Bill Clinton, like, they didn't really go in and I just feel like, I don't know. And like everything has just become so focused on Epstein himself, like, and it's like, we kind of knew like it was all about who he might implicate, but once he died, or maybe appeared to die, it kind of slipped through our fingers.
And it makes me wonder, because I feel like other papers have done articles, including like the New York Times and stuff, that have, kind of highlighted like Bill Gates's friendship with Epstein, and even some of his like bizarre scientific kind of ideas about like being cryogenically frozen and
Pinker,
impregnating 30 women on the Zorro Ranch in New Mexico at a time to like create this sort of like army, almost like Boys from Brazil,
cyber army,
a cyber army, and those things. And some people have been sort of lightly called out to be like, okay, you claim that you weren't friends with him at all, but like clearly you were friends. There were things about the MIT Media Lab that came out, but I feel like none of these things end up like going far enough or uncovering any like smoking guns. And it feels like maybe all the evidence that would actually, maybe it's meant to, maybe whoever either got Epstein out of there or killed him. I think those are maybe the only two possibilities. Like, there's no way he fucking killed himself. Like, they are broadcasting to everybody that was like blackmailed by him that like, you better mind your P's and Q's and you better play ball and like be extra good be on your best behavior, because now like the Epstein story has been kind of activated in the culture, and if we want to now, like they've almost set up a kind of like framework where they could selectively maybe ruin a few people that were connected to Epstein without blowing the whole network, which they probably don't want to do because he probably blackmailed so many people. Or, you know, as Alex Jones says, like, people are willing to be blackmailed to get into the highest order, you know, to get into secret society. You know, like that was kind of his idea, which I think maybe that is the case. I mean, like, that's the price of admission into, like, whatever kind of elite club that he was selling. And but I do find it at this point in the game a little bit like sus that there's a whole cottage industry around the salaciousness of like the Epstein scandal. And while I appreciate that I'm no longer looked at like a fucking psycho when I try to bring this up to people the way that maybe I did, or that, you know, people don't just think I'm like totally talking out of my ass or like believing wacky online conspiracy theories, which is definitely how it felt in like 2014, 2015, when I would try to explain like who Jeffrey Epstein was to people. I think like, you know, that's at least on a selfish personal level nice, but I am curious as to like why now? Why did they arrest him? Why did they either stage his death or obviously murder him in jail? Because I think they both, I mean, even it's kind of interesting to think like even if they swapped him out and got him out of there, they almost like, then that means they fabricated evidence to make it look super obvious that he was murdered. Which means like, what is the point of doing that? You know, wouldn't you want to maybe make it look more like he was, I mean, presumably the coroner had a body to examine. So there's that, unless the coroner is like in on it. And then didn't Jeffrey Epstein's brother like hire another coroner who had some weird connection to like the JFK assassination? And like,
yeah, I think so.
Yeah, like a forensic coroner. And so, you know, that means maybe they would have to like kill somebody else and like put him in his place. I do remember that there was a pretty wild, I actually happened to be in New York when Manhattan suffered a huge blackout in 2019, when I was there when Jeffrey Epstein was in like the downtown detention center. And I actually got to see from like a rooftop in Brooklyn that like all of lower Manhattan lost power. And I remember at the time kind of joking with people that like, oh, you think they're like getting Epstein out of there? you know, like just shutting down everything and then just like sneaking him out and replacing him with some other guy. And that was maybe a few weeks before he died. But you know, it's very murky and strange. And I have I think that Bissell's point that, you know, you would think they'd like to be able to wheel him out alive and well to show any young new proto-Epsteins they'll be looked after. I think that is kind of I think Ed Opperman made a similar point when he was kind of questioning whether or not he was really dead. Was like, well, you know, it's kind of just from like a kind of criminal conspiracy standpoint, it might be kind of unless he did something that like within these circles they know you crossed a line. Like if he threatened to like, you know, like he had blackmail on Clinton or Trump that would like totally implicate them, and he was going to give it to the prosecutors and they had to kill him, and then it would be, you know, a lesson of like don't snitch. But if they just kind of killed him in general to like shut him up because he was expendable, then what would that say about all the other pedo ring masters that the CIA and other intelligence agencies are using? Because I definitely believe they're probably still out there. I mean, we have evidence they were doing this in the 80s.
I feel like, you know, as you said, like, you know, people are willing to be blackmailed folks, and I feel like if there's proto-Epsteins out there, like, they know the risks. Maybe they would be willing to be involved. I mean, yeah, like, I guess, I don't know, but I don't know, I feel like the ship had kind of sailed on Epstein. It is an interesting point, like, you know, why I feel like if anybody were to sort of fake Epstein's death, then they would definitely, like, you know, it's interesting to wonder, like, why they would make it, like, or be okay with the speculation that he was murdered, you know?
It's almost a mainstream idea that you see, like, that Epstein totally didn't kill himself.
No one thinks that, like, it's completely bipartisan.
Yes.
No one thinks that he killed himself. And it's, like, not acceptable to... It's really funny because it's become... you know, you're saying like people used to say that you were crazy for, you know, mentioning Epstein or similar like sort of conspiracy theories or whatever. Now it's almost like uncouth to suggest that he did actually commit suicide. You know, it's kind of like become the opposite, like across the aisle, you know?
Yeah. But then you have to ask the question, it's like kind of like what is the larger thing going on like behind all this Epstein stuff? And I think it does probably lead back. I think there probably are some tangential Iran-Contra connections because he was flying around he had like a Saudi passport, an Austrian passport, which we mentioned that maybe Ronald Lauder, you know, managed to hook him up with and all those things. And he jumped into the game like right after Roy Cohn died in like 1986, and Roy Cohn was rumored to have like a pedophile blackmail ring. And of course, this is like concurrent with Larry King and Craig Spence and Omaha and all that stuff. But then, you know, you get these kind of I don't want to derail right now, but like, you know, maybe on our last question of like who in the alt media is sus, you just get these like all these people all of a sudden who are coming out with like their specific kind of lines on Epstein, and you know, certain ones seem to be quite obsessed with painting every aspect of his operation as like a creature of Israeli intelligence, which I'm definitely not like. I think there's probably a lot of evidence there that there was like a Mossad connection to Epstein, but I think we see kind of the tail that, like, wagging
even when there was, you know, first an intimation that he had this foreign passport, but it wasn't, you know, confirmed that it was Saudi. Like, you know, when there was just kind of like people were like, could it be Israel? You know, you know, almost I mean, I hate Israel, but like, there is this sort of weird aspect. Yeah,
you get this certain vibe sometimes from the maybe like the former Ron Paul crowd that is, you know, they have this kind of older idea of like non-interventionism. Michael Schuer also has this too, where he kind of has like a frothing hatred of Israel and kind of blames them for like everything bad that's happened, and like we should just let them like, you know, leave them out to dry kind of and just like cut them loose. I mean,
kind of agree with
that. Sure. Yeah, which is kind of, you know, but it oftentimes because they have that kind of perspective, they can operate in left spaces and get a lot of support from people if they're critiquing Israel, which of course is like, you know, in many cases justified. But then I think when you take it a little,
like I mean, it's the little shaitan, you know, a lot of the time it's a red herring, like when the United States is like implicated in some way, you know, or other things like Saudi Arabia, you know,
you get a lot of it, and you know, people do that to some extent with Saudi Arabia too. Even though I think with the Epstein case, that hasn't happened specifically, but
just,
in general, a lot of tail wagging the dog.
Right now, because I've just been like so like infuriated by like the rehabilitation tour of Israel, like that's, you know, been going on under Blumf.
No, I get it. Okay, so
anyway.
I think we can. Speaking of, you know, compromising people, I think we can get to question number 8 now, by Liberty Uprising, who says, I recently saw Hunter Biden used in the common meme format of Instagram versus Snapchat versus LinkedIn versus Facebook, all different pics or quote personalities of the same person. I started thinking, is this one of the contemporary manifestations of MK Ultra? Some of Ultra was creating dissociation from split personalities brought out by a traumatic experience. What if dissociation could be brought out in a much larger scale nationwide without the trouble of directly inflicting a traumatic experience on each person? With each social media platform, users create their own or new personality willingly. Most people portray themselves much different IRL or from one platform profile to the next. I know these aren't technically split personalities, but maybe the desired effect of people dissociating at some level IRL is being achieved. What are your thoughts on this working theory?
Yes, that's interesting.
Yeah, very interesting.
I think it resonates with some of the stuff that we talked about in the Josh Harris episode or the We Live in Public episode, where you know, he talks about Lovey the clown, the sort of persona that he would take on even like in business meetings and stuff, of this sort of like, you know, wacky clown character who he described as being his sort of virtual self, you know. And I think that we do like a lot of time have these sort of personae like online, and I think that it's very interesting. Like, you know, is it like dissociative per se? Like, I don't know, but I do think that it certainly does have this sort of material effect on like our psychology and how we think, how we interact with the world. So in that respect, like, I think that there's definitely, and I think that we've talked before about like the sort of connection between some of these programs and the development of the internet and the parallels between some of the objects of the sort of psychic research and the sort of psychological manipulation, the mind control stuff with the stuff in sort of cybernetics
the systematic enhancement of cathexis with like a screen or a piece of technology was really central to the very early like nuts and bolts like SRI development of like Douglas Engelbart and places like SARC and SRI. That's where like things like the mouse and like the graphical user interface came out of, and that definitely, and when I think about like alters, of course, like, or avatars, I mean, that's it's such a critical part of social media. You can see today, like, people invest like a ton of energy, sometimes like more energy to their digital self than they do to their real self. That's almost like, it goes without saying. As far as Hunter Biden, I mean, maybe I can speak a little on this because, like, I did do just a little bit of diving into, like, I don't know what you would call it, like Dickgate or Crackgate or whatever, just to see, like, what is this, like, Pizzagate 2.0 thing.
Well, I've been assured by The Intercept there's nothing to it, so I haven't really been paying any attention. I heard it was Russian disinformation, so
yeah. Little Birdie told me that too. So just ban anybody who posts anything about it. So what's interesting about that is, it's given me a little insight into the personality of Hunter Biden, I guess. And I mean, this scandal is simultaneously in some degrees, like, more substantive than Pizzagate, even though there are Pizzagate-y aspects of it. The main one is that the persistent teasing of the allegation that he had some kind of sexual relationship with his niece, who I guess I won't name, but you could easily find out who that is, and his dead brother's daughter, basically, while he was having an affair with his sister-in-law, the widow. And that has been teased for like the last week by this, like, and the provenance of this, I think maybe this is part of the reception to it, or the lack thereof, is that it comes from such a blatantly, if Steve Bannon was secretly behind Pizzagate last time, maybe he hit it a lot better than this time, where he's literally like leading the charge with this like ridiculous, Miles Guo. Wengui, the like exiled Chinese billionaire who is on like a crusade to like take down the CCP, as he's saying in a recent song that Steve Bannon plays every day on his podcast, and it's like you go to the website like gnews.org, and it's like this broken English of like, hello, American friend. Like, today we have shocking laptop hard drive evidence of moral depravity and incest of like U.S. candidate son, Hunter Biden. Like, it's just kind of like, it's so, I mean, talk about kind of like foreign interference, ironically. And it's weird that they, I don't know, maybe for a variety of reasons, like the media is like casting this as Russian desinformatia, when it clearly, I don't think this really does have much to do with Russia at all. It's like all about like right-wing Chinese dissidents that are teaming up with like Steve Bannon. And so in a sense, it is foreign interference, but it's like not the kind that the media wants to talk about. And also on top of that, I do believe that like most of these things that they are releasing are real. So, I mean, there definitely is, I'll at least give them the credit that the emails and the financial stuff like definitely show what I think any reasonable person probably could have figured out a while ago, which is that, of course, Joe Biden was like using Hunter Biden as kind of like a bag man to like make like shady business deals, and penetrate into places like Ukraine, and Burisma was obviously a crooked company, and Hunter Biden was flying around the world smoking crack and making ridiculous deals, and that's basically it does show that, but and then it shows literally hundreds of pictures of his very well endowed member smoking crack and having sex with prostitutes in the Chateau Marmont, mostly in 2017 or 2018, when he was going through a real kind of meltdown. And even more recently, I think a sex tape that he, and so this maybe goes back to the kind of a DID theory, that he posted a sex video with his sister-in-law on Pornhub, because people found his Pornhub account a few days ago, and it's a hardcore sex video, and that's not illegal. They're two consenting adults. It's a little bit.
He posts it's with his sister-in-law for sure.
Oh yeah. I'm pretty sure it was confirmed to be her. Yeah.
Damn. Okay.
And the thing that hasn't been confirmed, even though there are a lot of messages which nobody has challenged the veracity of, that talk about how when they had a falling out, the sister-in-law and him, that she started telling her therapist that he had been sexually inappropriate with her daughter, and Hunter Biden was very mad that these allegations were being aired to the wider family, and but it's still very unclear. They basically this G News site is promising that the big reveal is going to happen any day now, and we're going to show proof, but they haven't shown any proof of that, which makes me think that they probably they either don't have it, or they're purposely holding it back for kind of extortion purposes. It's also difficult to post child porn, obviously, because these are all very hardcore videos that he shot, and that actually brings me to kind of the brainwashing of the sort of MK derived effects of social media, especially when you throw drug abuse into the mix,
or
especially
pornography.
And pornography. This guy was he was posting porn videos of himself, and on Pornhub, where technically anybody could find it, he was recording himself with
which has some trafficking connections itself, I've heard.
Pornhub is absolutely satanic and kind of evil and all these horrible things, but even somebody as kind of rich, and I mean there's nothing worse than an entitled rich 45-year-old guy who develops a crack problem. A 45-year-old white guy who has millions of dollars and develops a crack problem. They are that, because they're going to go full Charlie Sheen, basically. I mean, he has a very similar trajectory, minus getting HIV. But basically, he was just pathologically addicted to coke, crack, and hookers, and webcams, cam girls, filming himself jerking off and showing his dick off, which but it's very fascinating how in perusing the 4chan threads, and contrasting it with the wild, insane enthusiasm in 2016 of the Pizzagate discoveries, where everybody was get in here, look what we discovered. Now it's most of the things on 4chan are memes with the picture of the lewd media, the other Chinese billionaire guy, and it was hello citizen, I have many new dick pics for you to analyze today. And now it's just become a meme where it's it's all these different memes of Trump, kind of the oh my god kind of SJW kind of caricature on 4chan. The guy going oh, the O face, and it's just him standing on a balcony throwing out Hunter Biden dick pics to everybody, and they're yes, give us more, this will surely defeat Biden. And even people are sliding into making fun of 4chaners for taking it seriously and basically being fuck this, this is bullshit, Biden's gonna win, this is not good enough, you guys suck, and so they're taking a much more cynical attitude of they got excited for a few days that there was going to be this kind of horrible underage incest thing that was going to come out, which admittedly, if it did come out, that would almost be too big of a oof to sweep under the rug, because then there was evidence that Joe Biden was aware of this and covered it up to protect his own family, which doesn't really have.
There are always poo-pooers of everything on 4chan, but I'm surprised still that it would be a significant kind of response.
It's surprising.
Like,
I mean,
they have been.
Yeah.
They're chimps when it comes to like Trump and the Democrats.
Yeah, though it doesn't seem as much. I mean, it seems almost like a kind of a more of a dead space. Like it's not. It doesn't have the same like seething energies that it had in 2016.
Yeah,
like a
for
lot of
sure.
people have moved on or gotten sick of it, and there's a lot of like almost black pilled like Biden supporters that are just like, I don't even like Biden, but like I'm sick of like standing Trump and like he sucks.
Sure.
Like I don't care anymore, you know, and like making fun of these like Bannon connected like Chinese billionaires that are just like forcing you to like look at dick pics of Hunter Biden for the next like 80 years, like just nonstop releasing like an infinite number of. I mean, admittedly there are a lot, but I think for Hunter Biden, I mean, he did have a deeply traumatic event in his early childhood, the car crash that killed his mother and his baby sister, and I don't know anything. I can't say anything beyond that about like his upbringing. He definitely seems to have like some demons. Even a lot of his like text messages are just like rambling, like cracked up, like like I should just I should just kill myself because everybody always just blames everything on me, and like sorry that like I'm not the perfect son and I'm just a fuck up, and like Bo's a joke. Bo thinks I was a joke, and like things like he's definitely like the Fredo. He's like Fredo Biden with a crack pipe, and it's and was probably being used and maybe was even compromised. Like I wouldn't even rule out he was like maybe caught like in a hotel hidden camera like with hookers like doing coke, and like the Chinese government like when he was in Beijing or Shanghai got that video of him. But it's interesting now they are. Bannon is pushing almost like he's overwriting like the interest in Epstein with like, well, no, the Chinese Communist Party is the one running like a global sex blackmail ring, and they've compromised like all the Democrats, and like everybody is like taken over by it. So which is like I mean, that's something that most large countries with intelligence agencies the KGB certainly trafficked in kind of like a sexual honey traps. I have never seen any evidence that they use children for that, and there's not even any evidence that China used children for that, or that Hunter Biden did anything with underage people.
I mean, I would not put it past either at all, but it's I mean, I feel like my thing now with the big like geopolitical players is that like anything the United States does that confers any kind of strategic advantage. I don't know if traffic of children is an example of that, but like it's only natural that the others would do the same.
It is easy to conceive at this point because I mean the whole world is like more or less under a kind of capitalist paradigm and a capitalist sort of system of political economy. And if, VIP pedo blackmail rings sprung out of like the vanguard of that world order, America and like NATO and things like that, it would be kind of a thing well, they have this weapon, so maybe we have to adopt something like it as well. And you could see that happening in this fall. There's no high Maoists in like the Central Committee in China to be like, wait a minute, this is wrong.
Like, like the whole thing of like comfort women, like stuff like that, that was a Japanese thing, but
yes,
I feel like there's examples of that, like anyway, it's certainly not like trafficking, under like what we would consider to be underage girls for sexual purposes. Is certainly not an exclusively American phenomenon, unfortunately.
That's true. That's true. But maybe for this kind of explicit like blackmailing purpose in like the second half of the 20th century, it seems like Britain was very like into doing something like this.
Yeah, there's certainly idiosyncrasies that you can observe in the United States and the UK, in particular the UK. But in terms of being idiosyncratic, but that Hunter Biden stuff is something. But it's interesting that, I mean, I guess it makes sense that people will become burned out on standing Trump. I mean, you definitely observe that, but they definitely clung onto it like for a while because, the old chant spirit, I feel like, definitely is one that at this point would be like over Trump, but sometimes it seems like that spirit has like flagged and been replaced by something a little bit lamer.
It's almost become stale now. It's like a stale meme to,
It's definitely a stale meme, yeah.
Yeah, it's cringe, as they would say.
It is very cringe, it's for sure.
Yeah.
It's cringe. I mean, he has become, it's ironically like, he has become Drumpf in a way.
Cheetah Man Blumpf.
Yeah, Cheetah Man. He's Cheetah Man Blumpf.
He didn't do enough to like uncuck America and
he
secure the future of the white race. So
exactly,
they're actually mad at him for that.
Yeah, for sure, definitely.
Yeah, I see a common insult actually on 4chan is calling Trump fans like MAGA, which I assume means Make Israel Great Again.
Yes,
and they hate him on that regard.
Right.
Which I mean, at least they're being consistent.
I guess so. At least they're being consistent. But that's
Mr. Best Friend of Israel.
I mean, Richard Spencer, I guess, is a Biden supporter now.
That's right. That's where we are.
Yeah.
That's where we are.
Yeah. Well, because there's less chaos, and Trump, he hasn't done anything for the white race. So anyway.
Take it down, the CCP.
Beginning for the games you want to play. Bring it on and I will fight to the end. Just watch and see. It's all started, everything's begun, and you are over. Cause we're taking down the CCP. Spread the word all through Hong Kong. We will fight till they're all gone. We rejoice when there's no more. Let's take down the CCP. They have all lied for too long. We will end what they do wrong. Spread the word all through Hong Kong. Let's take down the CCP. Let the bullets fly a little longer, and you will surrender. Let the bullets fly a little longer. We will have freedom to live. We will win. You'll surrender. Let the bullets fly a little longer. Let the bullets fly a little longer. Let the bullets fly a little longer. Let the bullets fly a little longer.
I think we'll move on to question 9 now, real quick. Again, from Bissell. Did we land on the moon?
I don't know. I mean, I feel like, as we kind of talked about, and going over the questions during the break, the remaining questions, this might be a good episode. So I feel like that's one of those really standard conspiracy topics. So I feel like we should, there's just so much to say about the moon, the moon. I was just reading, a website earlier today called whobuiltthemoon.com. And the operating theory is that human beings went back in time at some point to build the moon. And we must rise to the challenge of building the moon. Because otherwise, the Earth won't be the same without our moon. So, but I don't understand where the humans who built the moon came from, if not from the Earth. And would we have evolved in the same way? But anyway,
that sounds like.
Does that pertain to whether we? If we built it, obviously we landed on it. But anyway.
Yeah. I used to lean on the side of. We probably did. And then I think for a while, I even entertained the idea, maybe I still do, that while the actual trip to the moon was real, the live TV production of Neil Armstrong, or one small step for man, because of the inherent unreliability of getting a stable TV broadcast for this really big
and
historical moment.
There was a lot of stuff like that where they'd be like, this is the troops coming into Berlin or whatever, and it wouldn't really be that, so I feel like there's
things being staged even though they were hing.
Yeah, like news reports involving staged footage.
Yeah, because I don't know, would they want to risk being on the cusp of this epic achievement and then the satellite goes out or something And then, then they'd be, even if they did do it, they have to face all these allegations that, like, maybe they didn't, or, haha, you messed up. Like, you couldn't even film your own moonwalking, achievement correctly. But, I mean, I could kind of entertain that. But then I think, and yeah, I think we do probably want to save most of this for, like, a moon episode. But I think the most persuasive thing I read was, like, a series of articles by Dave McGowan. And he went in pretty hard on the idea that we did not go to the moon, and that it was, in fact, like a it was on like a soundstage somewhere. And, in a way that I think, like, Dave McGowan kind of had, a really special gift for. He placed it in a certain context and juxtapose certain factoids and kind of various circumstantial things to kind of pose, like, the Socratic question of, or, the rhetorical question of, like, does this sound likely? Basically that, I mean, one thing that I get great joy in pointing out is that, this whole meme that, like, we won the space race is completely predicated on basically winning, like, 1 out of 20 of the achievements of the space race.
Yeah,
exactly. Like, if you factor in everything that the sort of U.S. and Soviet Union were racing to do, like the first satellite, the first man in orbit, like the first, the first man to get to space, the first man in orbit, probably even, like, the first dog, first monkey in space, like, shout out to, like, and, all these other things, and even, like, sending a probe around the moon and stuff like that. And then later on, like, landing a probe on Venus and actually transmitting, like, several minutes of video from the surface in the early 70s. The Soviets basically beat us in almost every single category except for this one. And then, because it was kind of the hardest thing to pull off, like, we just declared, well, like, we came from behind and, triumphed and planted our flag. But if you look at it in that light, it suddenly seems kind of interesting, especially given that this happened in August of 1969, when Nixon had gotten into power and we were embroiled in a pretty rough period in Vietnam. We were losing that war. There was a lot of domestic opposition at home. People's patriotic fervor was really ebbing at the time. It was waning, you could say. And if you were kind of thinking, and, this is coming from an author who deeply explored, like, the Laurel Canyon counterculture in the 60s and found all kinds of, like, strange kind of circumstantial evidence that there was government involvement in that. And we know about MK Ultra and all these other things. So, I mean, is it really so crazy to think that, that this would be considered, like, politically necessary, even though maybe it's not great to, if maybe you couldn't legitimately get to the moon on time, like, if you knew maybe you're going to, like, lose the space race, to basically pull off this stunt. And
so do you think we subsequently landed on the moon? Or has anyone landed on it in reality?
Well, it's a good question, because the one thing. Okay, so yeah, that's part of the dynamic that. No, I mean, I assume the moon is real, but
I also think the moon is real because it's mentioned in the Quran, and, like, Allah wouldn't lie about if it were a terraformed satellite or hologram. I think you would say something. So
or a prison satellite to suck up our souls when we die and things like that. You feel like Allah would have said something about it.
Yeah, probably. I'm gonna. Yeah,
but I think
it swears by the moon. I assume it's not a nefarious ploy. Yeah,
I mean, I feel like it's weird and interesting that no other country has landed people on the moon, and that we basically stopped doing it. I think in the early 70s, like, we sent, like, several Apollo missions to the moon, maybe, like, 5 or 6. We had Apollo 13, which, like, I think maybe Dave McGowan even, like, cast a little doubt on Apollo 13 as a kind of, like, dramatized, like, psyop of, like, oh no, like, our boys are in danger, like, oh, but we got them back, like, NASA's so great. It also would require a lot of these astronauts being, like, basically signing some kind of contract to be liars for, like, the rest of their life.
Right. Yeah,
under pain
wasn't there, like, something where, like, Buzz Aldrin, like, punched a guy in the face for...
They had very feisty reputations towards anybody that doubted the moon landing was real. And yeah, he punched a guy out once, which, you know, you can look at like, oh, he's just like so offended that somebody would denigrate his achievement, but also maybe a little bit sensitive. Like, dude, you're Buzz Aldrin. You need to like punch a guy in the face. I mean, come on, you know, like, why are you so pressed? Is it because you didn't actually go to the moon? And then of course there's the whole can of worms of like, well, like how far did they go? You know, did they just like orbit the moon and then they presented this thing on television? And if so, like, I don't know, like why did they stop going back? I guess there wasn't kind of an immediate economic benefit to going. That everyone talks a big game about going back to the moon, but nobody has still really done it. There's no moon bases yet. I mean, we're like 50 years later, and that seemed to have. It's just weird that like so much effort. I mean, I guess it was. You know, I mean, even the kind of like the official narrative of going to the moon was kind of that it was like a PR stunt. To like we were doing it to show that we could do it. Right?
Yeah.
So it's interesting that, you know, people can't wrap their head around like, what if it literally was all a PR stunt? And you know, I mean, I think if you think about the people that were building these rockets and were in charge of that program, it was fucking Werner von Braun, like an SS officer, and a bunch of like German Nazi rocket scientists who, you know, I mean, if I think, you know, would they be willing to lie to stick it to the evil Soviets? To those evil Judeo-Bolsheviks?
Probably.
Maybe.
And, like, you know, I mean, and they probably already obviously had a base on the moon. You know,
that's also possible.
Yes. Right. You know, corresponding with the base in Antarctica where they were keeping the giants.
Yes.
But, yeah, like, yeah, no, I could buy it. I could kind of buy it either way. You know, obviously it's more exciting to think that it was this massive ploy.
Also, tangentially, you know, I think the rumors that Stanley Kubrick directed the moon landing are very interesting. Because that's a whole nother rabbit hole to go down.
And that's a whole thing where, like, in his movies, there's like secret codes hidden, like to suggest about how he faked them. You know.
Yeah, Danny in The Shining is wearing an Apollo sweater.
Right.
At one point.
Yeah. There's all that stuff.
That he was another one like Pynchon who like moved to England and refused to fly on planes after the 70s and was
there was
extremely
a whole documentary
reclusive.
about like The Shining being
Room 237.
Right. Yeah.
Room
I think
238.
So.
Yeah,
whatever the room in The Shining. Yeah, but it's interesting. And there was just that revelation that there's water on the moon, right?
Which it should be mentioned was discovered by the Soviets in like 1972, so not actually.
Well, then it was a conspiracy theory, and it was shitty, Lysenkoism science. That was not.
I just find it like I don't know if it was like worth it to go to the moon. I have to go back and look. That's why we need to do a whole moon episode because I'm not sure kind of why the Soviets didn't go to the moon after, like why they decided it was not worth their time to go when they probably could have done it. They had lunar modules and stuff, like they were investing in a program to go to the moon, but then they kind of gave up on. Maybe it was because of budget priorities and things like that. But it's interesting that they never went.
I remember following like pretty intensely the whole hat above or hat about lunar wave theory thing.
Oh yeah,
which is more like moon hologram stuff, but it was like maintained by like spider entities or something.
Spider gods, yeah.
That's something. My favorite. We should save this for the moon episode and move on to the next question. But my favorite Buzz Aldrin story, this is not true, but. It's definitely a sort of circulated that he heard some sound on the moon, and then when he came back to Earth, he realized that it was the call to prayer, and then converted to Islam, which he never did. None of that's true, but I like to imagine that it was Imam Khomeini who was singing the call to prayer on the moon, because of course we all saw him on the moon on the eve of the Islamic Revolution in Iran. But
it's a very sharp rebuke to the famous like Niet Boja propaganda poster in the Soviet Union, where like Yuri Gagarin is like floating around in space and like looking around like no God, which I think was a little bit like some of the militant atheism gets a little cringy in USSR.
He's above the firmament, okay? Like obviously he's outside the spheres of the planets at the least. Anyway,
owned by facts and logic. A little bit, but you know, I'll forgive him for it. So maybe move on to number 10.
All right, thanks for laying this landmine here at the end.
So this will be the last question we ever address on the podcast because we're gonna get canceled.
We're about to get droned for being TERFs. Well, anyway, I just kind of gave it away, but the question is, he even writes, and maybe want to get the podcast canceled. What's your take on transgenderism? The move to end its stigma and allow people to choose how they present are referred to as a positive thing to me, but it also seems to be getting very widespread use as a wedge issue and perhaps pushed on people as a bit of psyop. There seems to be a lot of accounts of people going through HRT or sex reassignment and regretting it. Well, I just want to say right out the gate, you know, we joked about being drunk for being TERFs, but, like, actually, like, I think that it would be, like, pretty, like, you know, silly to, like, have a podcast where it's like, oh, Bigfoot, like, maybe, you know, the moon, like, being a hologram, like, maybe, but, like, no, you definitely can't, like, be a different gender than, like, the one that you were assigned at first.
Hold on, Colin. I'm just kicking Bissell off the Discord chat right now and banning him from being able to listen to any of our episodes because he is a TERF scum. And
he's
no, just kidding. Well, I think you bring up an important point that if we're like gonna entertain the idea of like Bigfoot and like Project Monarch and like talk about very real like MK Ultra stuff, I don't think you can like put this category in kind of like, you know, a box of certainty kind of on either side of it. Or, you know, I don't think we can police this issue as if it is like 100% settled and like you basically
gender is a very complex thing. Like, yes, like the narratives around gender can be extremely dogmatic. The thing is really that there's so many wrinkles to this. I mean, like, people spend their entire lives and careers, like, talking about, like, gender and its construction. Like, you know, something that I often think about is, like, well, you know, just think about, like, in Islamic countries, especially in the past and still to an extent today, like, one of the traditional sort of male garments is the thobe, or, you know, which is kind of like a gown, you know, like it's like it doesn't have pants per se, you know, it's kind of like something that is associated with like what women wear, you know, it looks more like a what would we consider to be like a dress, like or in Tuareg culture even, to take it to take it even a further level, like, you know, in that culture, like men, or, you know, the hijab or the veiling of men is considered to come before like the veiling of women, and there's all sorts of like different ways that like gender is presented, like in, you know, culturally, and a lot of gender is certainly like culturally constructed. You know, these are like obviously the idea of the two genders, or the, you know, whatever, the idea of gender itself. And I think that even though now, you know, we're entering the idea of different gender expressions, like beyond male and female, those two, you know, binaries, or that binary still, you know, it creates sort of a pull, you know, there's the whole debate over like, are there just two genders? But like, I think that even those who say that there are more, a lot of the time the third, etc. genders are kind of defined in relation to either the binary itself of male and female, or one end of the binary. But, you know, either way, like, it obviously gender is like extremely complicated, and a lot of it like is, you know, is socially constructed.
Yes.
Yeah,
I would say if I could venture into you know, venture into this minefield, I would say that I totally agree with Bissell's feeling that like the move to end the stigma of transgenderism and allow people to choose how they present or refer to is a positive thing. I mean, I think that is a positive thing. But like anything else, I mean, I think that, you know, once it gets into it kind of trickles down into, you know, different sectors of society. And of course, keeping in mind that we have like a private for-profit healthcare system that in every other respect is kind of a source of distrust. And like, you know, people don't have a very high opinion of it just like looking out for the welfare of everybody in the United States because of just everything that, you know, we've all gone through with like kind of the informal, you know, market driven rationing of care and maybe over prescribing things because they make a lot of money for big pharma that, you know, if you look at the explosion of like, you know, SSRIs, antidepressants, like ADHD drugs, painkillers, like we've seen this again and again in this dynamic. And so I think this is almost less about kind of the personal identity and what one chooses to identify it, and more about like the last part of this question, which is about accounts of people going through HRT or sex reassignment surgery and regretting it. That's kind of where my little like paranoia radar starts to like light up a little bit.
Yeah, I definitely think, that's definitely a thing. And like to the extent that people like, because they're protective of like the rights or the acceptance of trans people who try to silence like those people from being able to say like their story, like that's definitely wrong. And like you know, the whole like there's so much like you know, there's a lot like here, you know, like I feel like, you know, I'm thinking like, you know, in terms of like people being able to portray themselves, like how that, you know, when you get into these issues of like, okay, so say a little girl likes trucks or something, you know?
Oh yeah.
Like,
I was gonna bring that up.
Does that mean, you know?
That's right. If I had a critique about kind of like the mainstreamed version of kind of this like you know, trans theory, if you will, I would say that like especially in the broader kind of normie pop culture is I've noticed in a lot of different instances the kind of perhaps unintentional essentializing of socially constructed gender roles and confusing that with like biological sex. Like basically the example of a little girl likes to play with trucks and action figures. Oh, she must be biologically a boy.
Right. There's a conflict between... There's a conflict that occurs between these two ideas, which people both have a commitment to. One, like that the idea that, you know, and I think that it's interesting because as we've kind of talked about like before, there is kind of almost a disagreement between the queer theory that kind of trickles down into the popular discourse at the higher academic level and what the popular discourse is. The popular discourse really depends on ideas like being born into the wrong body, which like, you know, that idea is complicated because it kind of deals with something that, like, you know, saying almost like you have a soul that is, you know, wrong. Like, I don't think that, you know...
or in other formulations, you know, like, you have a female brain, which gets into dicey territory in, like, in feminist terms, because you're ascribing an essentialism to female and male brains, which is... I don't know.
Yes, for sure. And I think that, you know, that might be like an accessible narrative for people to gain acceptance. But, you know, I think that even people who are like queer theorists would take issue with like the formulation of that, even if it's been sort of successful in sort of portraying the plight of certain people and sort of, you know, suggesting that, like, you know, trying to make the case for why, you know, certain freedoms should be, you know, or trying to gain acceptance for this in society. You know, I think that people are critical, even who are, like, you know, very much, like, theorists of this, you know, and of gender. I think that the idea of, like, you know, being born in the wrong body is, I mean, even stuff like, you know, it's not a choice, you know, to be, etc. I think that, you know, people, when you really sort of philosophically examine this, like, it becomes clear that you know, there's environmental factors, like, in everything, you know, it's not just like you know, people are very critical of essentialism, really, even though some of these essentialisms have in a way been perpetuated to advance the causes of gay people and, you know, LGBTQ people. So
and I noticed particularly, probably not as much, maybe not as much in the academic discourse, but certainly in, like, the popular discourse, that there is a constant, like, conflation and interchanging of the words gender and sex, that like these are not stable definitions that kind of get talked about in a very consistent way, where people talk about like, you know, like, I don't know, at least in my conception of it, like, you know, biological sex is about like the development of your reproductive organs and like the chromosomes that you have.
Yeah.
And gender is both affected by genetics and various environmental and social factors.
Yeah, or gender, like a lot of the time the separation that gets made is that gender is like the sort of performance or the socially constructed thing, and sex is like, you know, a biological thing. But like, yeah, that is not something that like, you know, queer theory at this point really upholds, or, you know, Judith Butler even criticized this idea, because even to talk about sex, there's always like gender implicit and inscribed in that. Which I think is in fact true. Like when you these concepts actually, to truly separate them, it's not 100% really possible. So it's like it's a very
true. I mean, because throughout human
like,
history,
you know,
this is like, and of course there's, you know, different, you know, traditions of like, you know, two spirits and things like that. But for the most part, these have been kind of like the expressions of like biological sex and socially constructed gender have kind of like been in sync throughout probably like the majority of human history. I mean, we could go back to way back. Maybe it wasn't it was more fluid than that.
And
but
I think that they still largely are. My thing about a lot of stuff to do with like sex and gender issues and like the issue of feminism in general, which is still something that's like sometimes contested in Muslim discourses. I think that this stuff, like, people portray as like a modern phenomenon, but I think that a lot of this stuff is actually older than people make it out to be. Like, you know, people like men, at least in the elite discourses that like are available to us from like medieval times, they often are concerned about like women, or like, you know, feeling like the same way that like a lot of social conservatives are now, like being upset about like women, you know, having more rights, or like the decline of this. It's like a perennial complaint in a way, you know, like people are, you know, and there's like, as you said, like there's a lot of instances of like, you know, sort of gender, nonconformity. Like even in classical fiqh texts, there's like a discussion of this. There's the famous hadith of the Mukhanath, you know, of the you know, the so-called effeminate ones. You know, this is something that existed even in the city of Medina, you know, where they, like, you know, there have been different, you know, treatments of them, you know, like, and sometimes they've been sort of accommodated into society, given some kind of social role, you know, like, again, like, so I think
a place throughout history as well. Like, there's always been a place for like gay and lesbian people to kind of like plug into society, even as oppressive as kind of the overall framework was. There was like, you know, even in the early 20th century, there was like, I think my mom would always say like, oh, well, you know, you would refer to somebody as just like a confirmed bachelor.
Yeah.
And that was a polite way to like kind of just like, you know, it's like everybody kind of knew it, but then you're not going to, everyone's not going to like rise up and be like, oh my God, like get this person, you know. Though that did happen, but like, you know.
You know, I think about like in, you know, Persian poetry, or like in sort of these homosocial cultures around like Sufism or for whatever, there's definitely like an aspect of male desire that is like at play, you know, like these things really transform and like can, you know, change over time. And like our ideas, like, you know, a lot of people talk about traditional gender roles or talking about like, you know, the 50s or whatever. But one thing that I think in terms of like the whole like aspect of the way this might be instrumentalized, like speaking of that, like, you know, I think about like the Hijra community in South Asia, or many different communities like that, where there's sort of like, you know, they're like, this is sort of a cultural phenomenon that, like, you know, or a gender expression that exists in this culture. But then, like, in the sort of international, like, I am sort of sympathetic to, like, the arguments that have been made by Joseph Massad about the gay international and things like that. You know, in his book Desiring Arabs, you know, the way that, like, people forget maybe that, like, in 2008, Obama was, like, he ran as being vehemently against gay marriage, you know? And one thing that is interesting is like when, you know, the sort of lens that we have only adopted very recently is then projected abroad and used to kind of pass a judgment for, you know, Bill Maher being like,
oh, absolutely.
Can you be gay in Gaza? Like, well,
yes.
you know, like you had sodomy laws like pretty recently, you know, like
yes,
it's not like to be like, well, we just decided yesterday that like if you don't, you know, like yesterday we were homophobic, but now like we accept gay people, and if you don't, we're gonna bomb you. You know, like
if
it's
you
just
don't
like,
literally accept this, like in 5 seconds, like now we can flip it around on you and
like,
make you seem to be intolerant, and
or saying like, oh, you know,
have.
that's trans, you know, like looking back into the past, saying like, oh, that like, you know, slightly different, like, you know, formation from like what we understand now as being heteronormativity, like that was actually queer or whatever. The thing that I have noticed about queerness is that, well, like the thing is, no one really like, you know, like conforms perfectly to like the platonic ideal of masculinity as imagined like in American culture or whatever. Like no one's really like, you know, the perfect, like, you know, cold, stoic, like John Wayne type, you know, masculine ideal.
Yes.
Everyone has like, you know, for instance, I'm pretty sure that like, I mean, of course, contrafactuals are like pretty absurd, but I feel like if I were growing up like in like today, like this day and age, like, you know, all other things being equal, like mutatis mutandis, like I think like I probably would be like trans or at least non-binary because like, you know, I'm like, you know,
well, it gets into that
like skinny,
yeah.
like I love poetry, like, you know, etc. Like things like that. Like
exactly,
I don't really like sports. It's like, you know, it's
and so
like,
I think there is that
no
social.
one is totally like, you know, everyone has some kind of thing with their gender, and I think that it's, you know, when like queer is sort of a very vague term, you know, a lot of the time I think, you know, for certain people like it can be a little bit of a grist for the mill, like an easy, you know, ill angle to adopt in some cases.
Or just
you
an
know,
identity, right?
And you always give everybody
nowadays,
the benefit of the doubt, you know.
But nowadays I think there is a social, especially if you live in like certain parts of the country, like it is different than it was like 20 years ago when, you know, like Boys Don't Cry like came out, or like Matthew Shepard and like all this stuff where there was still like these pockets, and even in the 2000s where, you know, they like ran on like Bush ran on like having a constitutional amendment to like ban gay marriage. And like I remember those battles like back in the day, and was always like supportive of like, you know, of like, you know, expanded rights and everything. But now it's almost like it's gone to a point where these categories, if you're a young person going through puberty and or, you know, your adolescence, and it's like hard not to notice the great amounts of attention that kind of get put on people that identify in a certain way, and that doesn't apply to everywhere, but I think if you go to like a liberal school in like, you know, the LA area or like New York or like places like that, that, you know, you might notice. And I've heard, you know, there have been like writers who have, you know, there have been some women who, I think a couple of them went on Joe Rogan, caused like a ton of controversy for bringing up more focusing on girls transitioning to trans men, and how they were like particularly concerned that maybe there were girls who otherwise, like perhaps, you know, there seemed to be like, it was too early to tell whether or not maybe they were just like queer or gay or actually like a trans person, but because like that's what's in the consciousness on like the internet, that's what you see on your smartphone every day as like kind of this big thing.
This is the way that it's environmental, like, you know.
And doctors suddenly like encouraging you and being very kind of eager to, it seems like, prescribe like hormone blockers and like puberty blockers and things like that, which like I think at the very least the jury is out on whether or not like that messes up your, like, you know, your development through puberty if you take a drug that suppresses it. They always say, like every documentary I see, like the nurse or the doctor there is like, now don't worry, if you don't like it, we can just take it out and like puberty will happen. But like I'm not sure that's actually true. And you know, I think those hosts were bringing up examples where like, you know, or these girls will get like double mastectomies like when they're like 18 or something like that, and then they'll like regret it, and maybe through those puberty blockers it'll affect their ability to have children. Like maybe they decide they are just like a gay woman after that. And I even think that there's maybe Again, this gets dicey territory, but especially in some, I don't know, these like TLC documentaries where they'd find like, you know, it'd be like an 8-year-old boy like that, you know, or
like
8-year-old yes, exactly.
One thing that always disturbed me about that was like, I remember there's this one clip where, and I mean, I guess that she was okay with it, you know, this, but Jazz was talking about how, like, you know, if she wanted to have a child because, you know, she would be transitioning, you know, she would just put her hubby's sperm in her sister, you know, like, and I guess the sister was like okay with it, but it's just like that.
Okay.
To me, is like,
that's
you know,
okay.
like chill.
Yeah,
I guess she was like 12 or whatever, like, you know, so I don't know if he. But like,
but just to finish my thread on that is like basically that I noticed that in a lot of those kind of things, and I think maybe in like Jazz's case, is that I was actually surprised that like a lot of the parents of these like trans kids, like these very young ones, were kind of lived more in like rural, like red parts of the country. Like they didn't live in like these weren't like Portland parents who were like super woke and everything like that. In fact, in a lot of cases, they were devout like evangelical Christians or some kind of Protestant Christian. And I know some people have kind of speculated, and it kind of would, you know, maybe in a certain way to maybe folks that have still a kind of unease around homosexual relationships being like an integrated part of society, that in a way that this is somehow more appealing to them to think of their kids instead of being like, my child is gay, being like, oh, well, my son is attracted to boys because he's a girl. Oh, and then they don't have to.
That's actually how it is in Iran. You know,
interesting.
In the 1980s. You know, since the 1980s, they've you know, allowed transgender surgeries like officially by the government. In fact,
which is one example of a religious.
According to Wikipedia, Iran carries out more sex change operations than any other nation in the world except Thailand, and I think that's part of the reason is that, you know, like you know, they're not.
Everything remains consistent in terms of religious teachings. If you can just say, then you don't have to like kind of rethink anything about the original, especially if you're somebody who kind of subscribes to like a version of either Islam or Christianity that teaches that like the Quran or the Bible is kind of the infallible word of God. Like, you know, I think that it's a kind of it's a way to kind of get around that a little bit. So in a way, it's kind of like they're almost enthusiastic to support their child's journey because it moves away. It like dodges all of these like harder questions for them to kind of grapple with. And in a way, I mean, what some of these people,
I mean, that's definitely been a critique raised by like rad femme lesbians for sure.
Yeah, exactly.
Like that,
and this is
like a
particularly
strain.
That's why people have brought it up, particularly about girls, because they think that, and you know, maybe to some extent it's about, you know, they're coming into their sexuality and they're lesbians, or maybe they have a fear of being sexualized, which is still kind of a default thing that happens to women in our society, that they become like looked at as like sexual objects, and maybe they have, for a variety of reasons, an anxiety or a fear around being sexualized. So then maybe the idea of like turning into a man, you know, becoming transitioning to a male means that you are no longer like looked at as a sexual object, and that's kind of a, so it's like, I mean, that's all to say. There's I think a lot of like complicated psychological stuff going on, and you know, it does suss me out a little bit that like the #1 clinic for like transitioning children in the UK is the Tavistock Institute, which is like a ton of like connections to like MK Ultra going back to like the 50s and 60s.
Yeah, I mean, well, I remember like reading this one book. I'm forgetting what it was called, but it was, you know, a queer theory book. I think, you know, I'm trying to see if I can dig it up actually right now, but basically, like it said like outright that like it was capitalism that like created the possibility for like gay and lesbian communities to like really emerge, like, you know, in the 19th and into the 20th century. And, you know, I think that, yeah, the social conditions, like, change the way these things are. Like, in order to truly be, like, gay in the modern sense, like, it's not a thing that, like, you know, it's not a real, like, these categories are, like, socio-epistemic constructs. And, like, you know, people in the past might have had sex with men, like, but maybe, like, you know, did they see themselves as being homosexual? Like, no, I mean, this is this is in Foucault, you know, like it's like these categories like are in some way like they're social epistemic constructs, and like and so like of course like the same, like, you know, if you want to talk about like, I don't think that there really are like base facts, but you just like, you know, the fact that the social like reality like supporting like one way to express things, like the channels of expression that are open like can kind of determine like how things go, and like, you know, to say like in sort of a Glenn Greenwald like libertarian sense that like, oh, the more like options one has, that will just mean that like what one is like naturally inclined to do, like, you know, I don't know if that's really tenable, but like, is this like, you know, bad? Does it like really affect anyone? Like, does it, you know, like does it stop you from like living your normal traditional like cottagecore life? Like, no. Like, if you want to, like, you can do that too. Like, you know, you might be like a conservative person who's like upset about it or whatever, but like ultimately, like, you know, just like chill. Like, I think that when it comes to the play, I think is like the whole issue of like pink washing and that type of stuff, like, which I mentioned, where like it becomes like an imperial strategy in the same way that like the concern over anti-Semitism can become like an imperial strategy, or the things you see Macron saying now about you know, sexism, like, you know, it is not our values to say like a little girl is the same as a little boy. Like, okay, yeah, since when? Like,
oh, I didn't realize,
you know,
he went turf all of a sudden.
Well, he didn't go turf. He was talking about Islam. You know, he was saying to say they're not equal is not our values. You know,
I see. Oh, the fact that you
we
put
cannot tolerate this in France. You know,
you put the veil on the little girl.
Yeah, exactly. Like, to say they do not have equal rights. Like, you know, okay, yes.
I apologize to our French listeners for.
Yeah, sorry. La Kanga, les défense. You know. But anyway. Ça va. Yeah, sorry. Yeah, ça va. Sorry. Yeah, French listeners, but Macron sucks. Okay, I'm just gonna say it.
He's really been on quite a Gladio head trip letely. I don't know what is going on in France, but anyways, we're over 3 hours now, so maybe we should.
Let's wrap it up. That was a lot. Anyway,
I think maybe we should. Yeah, we could go off about people in the alt media. Maybe we'll save that for our next Q&A episode, which I think we should maybe do every month, because this has been fun. But maybe we should just answer the last question here, which was like the big question before we peace out.
Right. Yeah, I think like which alt media personalities are sus. Like,
I forget who asked that, so I don't feel as obligated to. Maybe that was asked in the Grotto of Truth,
and I feel like all of them.
Yeah, like, pretty much all of them. All the people I certainly listed.
Anything dirtbag adjacent, for sure. Like, you know, just whatever, you know. Yeah.
If anyone wants to look at my my spider web tweet from over the summer, there's a lot of names on that web.
All left vets, definitely agree with that one.
Yeah, left vets, the Antifada, the Gray Zone, the Martins,
Glenn Greenwald,
definitely Greenwald.
Yes, anything. Yes.
Scahill, trash.
Right. Yeah, definitely.
The OnlyFans,
anything like in the you know, the orbit, the Chapo orbit, definitely, including like any podcast that might, you know, be in the same lane, same general lane as this one, or at least pretend to be.
You know, you hate to see it. The I mentioned earlier, Michael as Judge, The Death is Just Around the Corner. Actually, I think it's like a really good podcast, which like it breaks my heart that he has become such good like friends on Twitter with, I mean, whatever, it's his business. He can do whatever he wants, and he's making a ton of money now. So like, good for him. But it does, you know, when you see somebody who's got like pretty good it seems like instincts and insights and knows a lot, like trading like cum jokes with like a certain podcast of a certain Syrian war criminal. It really bums you out. Or when you ask them to interview that person about their interactions with special forces in Syria, and they go, "Dude, LOL, he's not CIA. Trust me, dude, he's not CIA." Come on, man.
But I love to post just about like getting my pistol ready for our podcast tonight. Doing
Grey Wolf symbol.
Doing lines of coke off my pistol and shoving it in my butt, like getting ready to pod. We always exchange texts about that.
But that we could go all day about sexual mutual aid, the OnlyFans uwu, socialist gun girls. Like we don't. I don't think we need to say much. I think what's up with that. Sus.
OnlyFans in general is such like when all those people were like, look at this house I bought with my OnlyFans. Yeah, right, you bought that house. Like, okay.
We could probably do a whole. I'd like to do like a deep research dive into. I'm convinced OnlyFans is like deeply.
We're really
evil.
Gonna get canceled. We're gonna be like turfs and swerfs. We're gonna like homophobic like scum. Anyway,
sex worker phobic. Whatever.
I think that we were good. I think like we were pretty good. Like we handled some of the nuance. The question sort of invited some of this stuff. I think we ultimately upheld everyone's dignity, I guess. Anyway, well, we'll see what happens.
We'll see.
We might get droned. We might get put into Gitmo with J.K. Rowling. Anyway,
hope not.
Tried by secret tribunal by Charlotte Clymer. And have to fucking turn
Emily
back
Gorchensky.
Justine Tunney. And
Alice Azavandium. All the sketchy like Google engineers who build drone technology. We're gonna get the drone. Definitely.
But
whatever,
Okay.
So the last question is from Ivan Drago, and he said, "I would also be interested in hearing both our stab at a quote grand unified theory of everything without regard to what it can actually be substantiated at this time. If you had to throw out an explanation that ties together all the spooky stuff, the motives, and the general trajectory of history, what would it be?"
Oh, okay. Yeah, that's an
pretty easy question.
All right.
I think
softball.
It could probably be a whole episode of a kind of
a
tracking that
theory
question.
Of everything. Well,
maybe if we can briefly take a quick stab.
I definitely think that there's one God, and that Muhammad is his prophet, and I definitely think that jinn are real and shaitan is real. But like in subtle ways. Like there's many like nuances to understanding like the existence of the dynamics of these things that like one could go into like at length. But like those are like I guess maybe important principles. Is this like a theory of conspiracy stuff? Like all the spooky stuff?
I think it generally says ties together all the spooky stuff, the motives, like who are the globalists? What are they trying to do?
Well, I don't think that there really is like any one single like nefarious group. Like I think that that's like a bit like too reductive. I think that there's like many different like sort of spooky tendencies that are like I think that like in terms of like a Geist that operating through history, like there is like a satanic force, but its operations are very like murky and mysterious, and like it's something that like we dealt with this in the Salem Witch Trials episode, where Shaitan kind of acts by the leave of God, so it's hard to like to deal with this problem and to pin it down like why this is being allowed. I'm kind of like flailing here with my grand theory of everything, but I mean, I don't know. Like I think that really what I ultimately think is that like the nature of things like resists like a singular unifying theory. Like I do believe in like the principles that I stated, but I think like Athelot says like he like nothing can comprehend him, like he comprehends everything. But I think that this is something that is very difficult to do, and in terms of the the conspiracy side, like, you know, yeah, it's watch out for gins, you know, basically.
Appearing sometimes in the form of a man.
Yeah, definitely. And yeah, like, you know, he whispers in the hearts of men. He has soldiers and minions. Shaitan does, that is. So yeah, read the Quran. That's my grand theory of everything. Yeah. All right.
Interesting.
That's
My stab will probably only not be too satisfying without spinning off in a million directions. It just to maybe limit it to like who is there a force behind all the spooky stuff, and like what are the motives of maybe the power elite in the world. I don't know. I think kind of in line with what you said, that I think it is an immensely difficult, I don't want to say like impossible forever kind of task for human beings to like fully kind of achieve full awareness of like the nature of reality and like our place in the universe. I think that there's still a lot of like mystery to hack through, and I don't think I do think that something like, say, like Marxism made some very important strides towards a kind of like, you know, a de-psyoping, if you will, of like certain mystifications. But there are still more mystifications that remain. So I am like hesitant to fall into the trap of like hard capital M like materialism that, like, you know, I mean, as is evidenced by like every episode on this podcast, obviously. But in terms of like who are these bad guys, you know, or is there one bad guy? Is it all just structural and like, you know, beyond individuals? I don't know. I mean, I do think that the prophecy of capitalism is still kind of playing itself out, but I think that there's kind of I don't know, which is to say that it is going to, you know, as V.I. Lenin argued, in imperialism, the highest form of capitalism, the highest stage of capitalism, that basically it would kind of like a cancer just like continually eat everything in order to chase like the structural falling rate of profit. But it also involves I think in maybe in a very inexorable way, it is not going to be able to like break that fundamental rule or transcend that fundamental rule of capitalism. And so they are resorting to like probably the biggest, you know, somewhat decentralized, but program of like mystification probably ever attempted in human history, because like that is kind of the ace in that is the ace up their sleeve, is to remystify all of these different relations between humanity, even to the point of creating a like terrifying dystopian transhumanist future where our streets are patrolled by like drone operated like Boston Dynamics dogs with like guns on their backs or something. I think that, you know, in a way, you know, that's terrifying. I guess the only way I can kind of sleep at night is thinking that in a way they're doing this out of desperation to hold on to their own power, which means that they are not invincible. And I think, to paraphrase the movie Predator, if it bleeds, we can kill it, as I think Governor Jesse Ventura said. And I think in a way, like and maybe, you know, I don't know if this is like really true, but I feel like, you know, and even in a more kind of loopy metaphysical sense, because the devil is the prince of like the material world, that maybe because he's the prince of the material world, like he can bleed and he can be killed as well. Though I think if I'm sticking on the metaphysical side, like probably Shaitan will like never go away, because it's like it's a feature of this reality that there is kind of like a tempter, a subverter, a rebel.
It's a feature of this reality, but this reality like will end. You know, there will be like an end to that. I think, but who knows what the fate of Shaitan will be? You know, maybe Shaitan himself like can be in some way redeemed. it's hard to say. Like, you know, these things are very mysterious.
Yes.
But
and yeah, I mean, I think that these people, you know, are they all like quote unquote Satanists? Like, some of them maybe.
Only in like the most like, you know, abstract sense, like not like in the conscious like Luciferian sense. I think
like
that
maybe some of them are, you know, taking ayahuasca to like convene with like with jinns to like tell them to, like, you know, dominate the market for
I think that one trend really is like the things that like Satanism does sort of uphold as and glorify are you know, the conquest of the individual will to power, you know, the idea of the human being in some way like becoming a god, you know, and I think that like impulse, you know, I think that like a degree of like submission is good, and people have a great aversion to like this notion of like submission because like I think especially like in the American culture, because like, you know, we're conditioned to believe like, you know, I'll die on my feet or whatever, you know, like better to die on my feet than
don't
live
tread
on
me,
knees. You know, like I'll never kneel, you know, like whatever, you know, stuff like that. Like I even remember Malcolm X expressing like the difficulty that he had in like, you know, learning to pray like Salah. But like, you know, I think that there is like in order to like access that freedom, like sometimes you have to like engage with that potentiality of submission. And I think that like there's definitely a trap in like the pursuit of like the refusal to, you know, it's interesting because I think people a lot of the time like, I think that a lot of the time people like see like, you know, maybe this is the like sort of edgy atheist thing where people see religion as kind of like a fear of death like manifesting, you know, like religion is about being afraid, you know, like about being afraid of hell or about being afraid of dying. So people make up like fairy tales of sky wizards,
Sky Daddy,
or whatever. Yeah, exactly. But like really, I think that there is a kind of fear in the idea of like wanting to become God that's like much deeper. Like there's a deeper sort of fear in the idea that like, you know, the hope of escaping judgment like in either one's own sort of lifetime or in, you know, the ultimate like teleology of humanity, like the idea of like, I think that there's, you know, people run away from the fear of there being some kind of greater judge over this or metric, like, because I think that
I think that kind of lines up with like maybe my suspicion that a lot of these capitalist billionaires are in a race to develop technologies that will allow them to either live forever or like upload their consciousness to like a machine. And I think that is a kind of, I think to some extent, foolhardy
because I think they know on some level, like, you know, on some level they like they have some kind of feeling that they're going to hell, like, so they need to not die.
Regardless of your religious beliefs, we all end up in the same place, and then maybe that creeping fear, even just the loss of that power, and like, you know, dissolving into nothingness. Like if they're an atheist, you know, could be like, you know, extra terrifying because of how much power they have in this world, that they're just clinging to it. They never want to let go. And so they have to keep getting more. They have to keep accumulating, and then even kind of, I don't know, maybe psychologically enslave the entire world to not want to overthrow them or like liquidate their power. But even at the end of the day, you know, you're either not gonna fool oblivion in the atheistic sense, immaterial sense, but you're not gonna
I don't
fool
even know
the final
if I
judge.
really. I'm kind of an atheist-ist. Because I don't really think like people are really atheists. Like I guess that's kind of like a really like bird-brained like evangelical Christian idea where like the atheist professor who's like saying like, now you all must worship Charles Darwin or whatever, like is always like angry at God or something because like, you know, his wife left him for being too much of an atheist asshole. Like, you know, I kind of do. I think that on some primordial level, like the same way that like, you know, people will knock on wood who are like convinced atheists. I don't know. I feel like That might be a controversial take. Maybe not the most controversial take made in this episode, but, I think that on some level, people have a sensibility of this. Whether, maybe it's not even true, but, because of the nature of what, again, this is, the problem of, apprehending reality in these ways. But I think that there's something to, in the same way, there's something to,
I think it's, it's hard for anybody to fully escape the sort of not knowing problem of the human condition. Of really, even if you're an atheist, you really can't just, fly up in the air and say, "Nie Boże." You can't, you don't actually know, what really is, and that's not even to come down on any, hard interpretation, but you just don't know.
That's the very nature of it. You're always poised between hope and fear. And there's Merleau-Ponty, who I think is a great philosopher whose thought has a lot of things in common with a lot of Sufi thinkers who I admire, like Ibn Arabi. He says certainty is doubt. And there's every certainty has a background of doubt, and or every doubt has a background of certainty. So in order to perceive something and then say is that really there? You first have that sort of perceptual faith, that inherent kind of belief. I think that is that's in the phenomenology of perception. I think phenomenology is very interesting, but anyway, so
I think we're good. This has become a record length ep.
It's already there are other stuff I wanted to address too.
333. We're at 333 right now.
Wow.
Okay.
There was other stuff I wanted to address. I wanted to address the, I think, incorrect idea that the text from the Masonic Fraternal Police Force episode, website in episode 2 was generated by an SEO script. But we can save that for the next.
Who even said that? That's
it definitely was not the nature of SEO text. It was someone who replied in the thing saying, I think that site is run by a spammer. If you go into the Wayback Machine, you can see the original site. But most of the text that we read was on the original site. Maybe this history of the Freemasons wasn't. But, I don't think that was SEO generated.
I remember reading the original thing back in 2015 or 2016 when it was a news story, and it was pretty much
There definitely was
identical.
a time when it was the website was all about selling cabinets or whatever, but even then it did have that text on there. So I don't know what's going on. There definitely maybe there's some, Brandon Keel might still be out there. Maybe he's still running the site.
He might be running the site. Yeah, for all we know. And maybe he'll get a sick job in the Biden-Harris administration. Chief of Masonic Outreach.
One last thing as a shout out to, our very first episode where we talked about, I thought this could be an opportunity to cover some missed ground, and I was really kicking myself for not quoting this in our recent Salem Witch Trials episode. And, this kind of reminded me of the conversation we were having in our very first episode. I'm coming off a total religious freak in this episode. I seem like I hate all gender nonconformity. I'm quoting Cotton Mather here. I'm saying, telling everybody read the Quran. That's my theory of everything. But anyway, he writes, we have been advised by some credible Christians yet alive that a malefactor accused of witchcraft as well as murder and executed in this place more than 40 years ago, then give notice of an horrible plot against the country by witchcraft, in all caps.
Wow.
And a foundation of witchcraft then laid, which if it were not seasonably discovered, this is, the font of this is great because it has those S's that are really F's.
End time.
Diff covered, end time, would probably blow up and pull down all the churches in the country. And we have now, with horror, seen, or fiend, the discovery of such a witchcraft. An army of devils is horribly broke in upon the place which is the center, and after a fort, the firstborn of our English settlements, and the houses of the good people there are filled with doleful shrieks and their children and servants, tormented by invisible hands, with tortures altogether preternatural. I thought that was very interesting because it harkens back to what we talked about the invisible hands.
Adam Smith, invisible
kind
hands.
Of image. Yes, in our very first, preliminary materials. Yes. Anyway, you know, I really thought going into this, like, this episode's gonna be shorter, but no, we...
2 hours, no big deal. But we went. I guess maybe I'll just throw in one corrective, because I'm kicking myself. In the episode Contra 2, Smuggler's Blues, I feel very bad that I did not mention that Mr. Barry Seal, as a young guy growing up, I think in Baton Rouge, was in the same Civil Air Patrol unit as a young man named Lee Harvey Oswald, and their like Civil Air Patrol leader was David Ferry. So Barry Seal, not described in the movie at all. They show him getting recruited by the CIA in like 1979, but in fact he was part of Operation 40, which is discussed in Daniel Hopsicker's book Barry and the Boys, which found a photograph of all of these people that maybe have had ties to the JFK assassination hanging out in Mexico City, I think in like 1960 before the Bay of Pigs. One of the other guys in it was, I think maybe like David Atlee Phillips was in it. Ted Shackley was there, and Barry Seal, and also Porter Goss, who became George W. Bush's CIA director in 2004. And you know, it just lends a little. And then, you know, I don't know, whatever we said about. Actually, I forget if I clarified when I brought up that like George Bush's phone number thing. Did I actually mention in the episode? I know we found like that Spartacist article, but in case I didn't explicitly mention, it was when his widow was going through his records afterwards. She found George Bush. She found like a phone log that had frequent calls to George Bush's private number, in addition to the DIA number that she called. So and then there was that guy that, you know, went to like pay off Jack Ruby before the JFK thing that was like Barry Seal's lawyer. And you know, one day when we get to our HW did JFK episode, we'll dive deeper. But I just wanted to throw that out there in case anybody was not aware.
There's
Lee Harvey
some
Oswald
good episodes coming down the pipe. I want to do like we got to do like a proper cryptid one, you know, like at least this month. Maybe not right away since we just did a bunch of spooky ones, but you know, maybe like an interlock one, Mark Lombardi.
Oh yeah. Interlock I think is good. Maybe some reptoids. I think maybe
reptoids definitely has to happen. Yeah,
maybe a
Someone
Blavatsky
suggested
episode.
to me Wendigo, like, you know, maybe that could be a Dogman Wendigo tie-in. You know, I'm all about the Dogman.
Okay. Also, you know, at some point, I think even like a Yeti episode.
Yeti.
I was talking to somebody recently who had written a screenplay about like a Yeti thriller.
Interesting.
And, you know,
one of my favorite short stories is a short story Longtooth, which is kind of about like it's set in Maine, I believe. I think it's called Longtooth. And it's like, it is Longtooth by Edgar Pangborn, and it's like kind of a very spooky Yeti story that I love. I mean, I love like all ape-man, all cryptid stuff in general, but, you know, I restrain myself because this could easily just degenerate into cryptid jihad if I wasn't careful, you know. It just feel like
we wouldn't want to go full cryptid, but we will.
No, but we will deal with all
the
and splitting them up, you know, the splitting Bigfoot from the Yeti, you know, that gets even more mileage out of it, you know.
That's true. That is very true.
Yeah. It makes but I think, you know, we can even do sequel because there's a lot to like. Giants 2 is coming. You know.
We will get there.
It's inevitable because like they're all over the place. I really think that, you know, maybe that guy was, maybe his 1-star general friend was right. You know, maybe this is the biggest issue that we've ever dealt with, or whatever he said. You know,
Well, I hope that's not like. I mean, it's not October anymore. I hope that's not the November surprise that.
Well, maybe on election day. You know,
this depending on how fast I can
out
work.
from underneath all the mail-in ballot boxes, like those are the tunnels that the Giants are gonna erupt from.
Exactly, and I don't know if I'll be able to. I think this will probably, I'm guessing, come out on election day. So, you know, if you need a break from the ensuing like apocalypse that's going to happen, or the race war or the Jade Helm martial law rollout or the EMP attack from China.
I was thinking this could be a two-parter, but I also kind of want to bury my, remarks about the plandemic and, trans skepticism, like, in between. Not that I really express that at all, but in the middle of the 4 hours or whatever.
This will be public, but it is for the real heads who want to get to like that B-side, those deep cuts and everything. And I think we will do, and I think we'll do this every month. For anybody that wants to, maybe the next one will be shorter. But if anybody listening to this wants to like get in on the Grotto of Truth Discord chat and be able to ask us questions that we will talk for a very long time about.
We'll have to cap the questions. Like if we want it to be shorter, we're gonna have to cap the questions because people are like, if anything,
well, like, the OG acolytes got to they were the first in, so they we had like 11
Bissell
questions.
Deserved his 3 questions or whatever.
He did. In the future, we may have to do a sort of stack system where everybody gets their first question responded to.
Well, hopefully more people will subscribe to Alwara in the future.
So if you go to patreon.com/supplementaljihad, you can sign up for. We actually do have 5 or 6 premium episodes now. So, and you can, join the Discord chat and submit your questions, and we'll get to it at the end of
posts.
November if America is still here.
Yes, it's true. If it hasn't been overrun by giants with pet Tyrannosaurus Rexes.
Yeah, exactly. Fingers crossed. Inshallah, we'll be here. That's I guess next time it will be after whatever clusterfuck happens on Tuesday.
Yeah, we'll probably know nothing by the time we're recording, but we'll see.
We'll see. We're kind of planning. Our next ep schedules are kind of dynamic right now.
We need to work that out, but I think we have some good options. We can hammer it down later. Now we've already talked for a long time, but we'll do it imminently. Yeah.
All right. So that's the deal, and stay safe out there. Vote or not, I don't really care.
Vote. Stay the fuck inside, but vote. Also go. Yeah, you vote. Yeah.
Go vote for the fascist or not even social fascist. That's like giving him too much credit. But just vote for whatever or don't, and we'll catch you next time. But until then, dear listeners, stay vigilant.
Peace.
To the east, they look to the west. The third world wonders which way's the best. We got freedom. We got soul, we got blue jeans and rock and roll. Man, there ain't no choice. It's better in the USA. It's better in the USA. You can be what you want, say what you want to say. It's better in the USA. How can I make you understand? It's better in the USA. It's better in the USA. I hear the same propaganda day after day. It's getting so hip to knock the USA. We're so awful and we're so bad. You ought to check the nightlife in Leningrad. Man, it ain't even close. It's better in the USA. It's better in the USA. You can see behind the curtain, life is cold and gray. It's better in the USA. How can I make you understand? It's better in the USA. It's better. I think I'll play. It's better. Nobody's perfect and change comes slow. It's really up to you which way you want to go. You can move to the left or move to the right. You can stand in the dark, you can stand in the light. Driving on the beach on a night in June. Me and my baby in the lover's mood. We're playing sweet soul music, gotta turn up loud. Make me feel so good, make me feel USA.